Welcome back. Hey, my dear friends. Tonight we're stepping back into a world so ancient that even the stars seem younger. You find yourself standing near a quiet, dying fire while cold air drifts gently over the sleeping ground. The flames crackle low, tossing small sparks up into the deep black sky. Around you, shapes of people rest beneath hides, woven grass, and the long shadow of trees. So before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you make yourself comfortable, tell me where you're watching from and what your local time is, because somewhere out there, someone else is also lying awake in the soft middle of the night. Now, dim the lights and let your breathing slow as you step closer to the fire. You're not in a bedroom anymore. There's no glowing phone on the blanket, no little blue numbers on a clock, no ceiling fan turning lazily above you like a very quiet modern bird. There's only the night wide A. Ninth patient stretching over a landscape that might be somewhere in Ice Age Europe, or Western Asia, or another old human place where our ancestors once moved carefully through valleys, forests, riverbanks, and open grass. The world around you is roughly 50,000 years in the past. Humans like you, Homo sapiens, are already present in many parts of the world, carrying tools, language, memory, and fire. That's one mainstream fact we can rest on gently tonight. By this time, early modern humans had spread far beyond Africa into parts of Eurasia, meeting cold climates, unfamiliar animals, and landscapes that demanded patience. They didn't live like cartoon cave people, grunting at rocks and accidentally inventing soup every Tuesday. They were skilled, observant, social, and deeply adapted to their surroundings. You stand near their camp, careful not to disturb it. The ground is uneven beneath your feet, firm in some places, soft with old leaves in others. You smell wood smoke, animal hide, damp soil, and the faint mineral scent of stone warmed earlier by the sun. A few embers glow red at the heart of the fire, pulsing like quiet eyes. Every now and then, a branch settles with a soft snap, and the sound feels much louder than it should, because the night has a way of holding every noise in its hands. Around the fire, people sleep in loose closeness knot, packed together like luggage in an airport. Thankfully, but near enough to share warmth and awareness. Someone has turned onto their side, knees drawn up. Someone else sleeps with an arm over a child. A few tools lie nearby, flakes of stone and shaped points placed with a practical neatness that says tomorrow already exists, even if no one has written calendars yet. You notice something strange, only because you're from the modern world. No one seems surprised when a sleeper stirs. A woman opens her eyes slowly. She doesn't gasp or panic. She doesn't sit upright and wonder whether she's ruined tomorrow by failing to achieve one. Perfect block of sleep, which is a very modern little tragedy. She simply wakes for a while. She listens. Her face is turned toward the darkness beyond the fire, toward the shifting black shapes of trees and stones. Her breathing stays calm. She pulls a skin higher around her shoulders and looks toward the embers, judging whether the fire needs feeding. This is the heart of tonight's journey. You're here to understand why waking at night may feel so familiar, so oddly human even now. Not every midnight awakening is a problem. Sometimes it's stress, light, noise, age, illness, caffeine, or that heroic decision to check one message at 1:17 a.m. But sometimes, beneath all that modern clutter, there may be an older rhythm, a quieter inheritance of body, remembering that night was once not a blank wall of unconsciousness, but a landscape to move through in stages. Scholars remain divided on exactly how prehistoric people slept. Of course they do. Prehistory isn't generous with diary entries. Nobody 50,000 years ago left a little note saying, "Woke after first sleep, thought I heard an owl, went back to bed." Researchers have to work from archaeology, anthropology, sleep science, and comparisons with groups who lived without electric light until recent times. Some suggest that segmented sleep with periods of waking during long nights may have been common in many human societies. Others caution that sleep patterns vary widely with climate, season, safety, workload, and culture. So tonight, you don't force one simple answer onto the ancient dark. You walk gently through possibilities. The woman by the fire reaches for a stick and nudges the embers. A small orange glow spreads through the ash. Smoke rises, fragrant and dry, then bends as a soft wind moves through camp. She waits. Waiting is a skill here. The night doesn't reward impatience. You can't tap a lamp, adjust a thermostat, or complain to customer support because the sleeping area is drafty. Another person wakes near. Why an older man, perhaps, with hair tangled from sleep and a fur wrapped loosely around his shoulders. He looks toward her, and no words pass at first. Their silence isn't empty. It's full of shared knowledge. They're checking the same things. Fire, children, weather, sounds beyond camp, the position of the moon, the breath of those nearby. You hear insects faint and uneven. Somewhere farther away, an animal calls once, then falls silent. The sound isn't close enough to alarm anyone, but it enters the waking mind. The older man tilts his head. The woman pauses with the stick still in her hand. Then, after a few breaths, both relax. The fire receives another small piece of wood. A quirky little detail from later human history helps illuminate this older possibility. In pre-industrial Europe, people sometimes referred to a first sleep and a second sleep, with a wakeful interval in between. During that quiet gap, they might pray, talk, tend the fire, visit neighbors, or simply lie awake. That doesn't prove prehistoric people did the same thing, but it reminds you that the modern expectation of one smooth, sealed 8-hour sleep may not be the only human way. It may just be the way that looks best on a productivity chart which, frankly, has never cared much about moonlight. Here, by the ancient fire, sleep feels less like shutting down and more like entering the night's rhythm. People drift in and out of awareness. One person wakes because the cold has touched their feet. Another wakes because a child shifts. Someone else may wake from a dream and stare into the sparks until the dream thins and becomes only smoke. You kneel close enough to feel warmth on your hands. The heat is uneven, almost alive. Your face warms while your back stays cool. The air smells of resin and old ash. Above you, stars crowd the sky in numbers modern city dwellers rarely see. They're not decoration here. They're part of the world's structure, as present as stones, rivers, trees, and breath. Anne. As you are. These ancient sleepers wake and settle, a strange comfort begins to unfold. Perhaps your own midnight waking isn't always a failure. Perhaps sometimes it's just a small, ancient doorway opening in the dark. You sit beside the embers a little longer. The woman's eyes grow heavy again. The older man shifts closer to the warmth. The animal call doesn't return. The camp softens. Breath deepens. The fire lowers itself into a steady red glow. And the long prehistoric night continues, not empty, not silent, but calm, watchful, and full of human sleep. Before clocks ruled sleep, the night didn't arrive as a number. It didn't become 10 p.m. with a little digital judgment glowing beside your bed. It didn't ask whether you'd met your sleep goal, closed your rings, finished your emails, hydrated properly, and become the calmest possible version of yourself. The ancient night simply came. It spread over the land slowly, first as blue shadow beneath trees, then as iolite dimness over hills, then as a deep black quiet that folded around the camp. You remain close to the same small group, still near the embers from the first watch. The people around you have no mechanical clocks, no written schedules, no factory bells, no train timetables, no calendar alerts politely ruining the mood. Time is measured by light, hunger, cold, fatigue, memory, and the movement of the sky. The sun has gone down. The moon has risen higher. The fire has dropped lower. These are the clocks that matter. In this older world, technology is simple, but not primitive in the foolish way modern people sometimes imagine. Stone tools are carefully made. Fire is controlled and guarded. Clothing may be stitched from hides using bone needles in some Ice Age communities. Mainstream archaeology tells us that by 50,000 years ago, humans were capable of complex tool-making, long-distance movement, symbolic behavior, and social cooperation. They weren't wandering through life confused by every bush. They knew their landscapes with the closeness most of us reserve for the layout of our favorite grocery store. You walk a little beyond the firelight, careful with your steps. The ground is cool underfoot. Dry grass brushes your ankles. Somewhere nearby, a nightbird gives a low call, then stops, as if embarrassed to have spoken too loudly. The air smells of smoke, crushed plants, and cold stone. Above you, the stars appear bright enough to seem almost textured. There's no city glow to blur them, no street lamp hum, no distant highway. The sky feels close, deep, and full of patient signals. The camp behind you rests in layers of awareness. Some people sleep heavily, their bodies surrendered to warmth and exhaustion. Others drift lightly, turning when the fire snaps or when the wind slides under a hide covering. A child murmurs in sleep. An adult's hand settles gently on the child's back. No one explains this. No one writes a parenting book about it. The movement is simply par. Right of being human. You begin to notice that night here has phases. Early darkness is busy. People finish eating, adjust bedding, check tools, pull materials closer to the shelter, and watch the fire strengthen. There may be quiet talk, low laughter, a soft exchange of memories about routes or animal tracks seen earlier in the day. Then comes deeper sleep, when bodies sink and the camp becomes still. Later, in the middle hours, some wakefulness returns. Someone shifts the wood. Someone listens. Someone steps away briefly into the cold. Then, closer to dawn, sleep may deepen again, heavy and grey, as the body waits for the first suggestion of morning. Researchers continue to question how far back segmented sleep patterns go. Some studies of pre-industrial and non-industrial communities show flexible sleep, shaped by season, temperature, work, and social life. Other researchers point out that not all groups sleep in two neat blocks, and that ancient sleep probably varied across climates and cultures. The truth, as usual, refuses to be tidy. History does that. It enters the room and moves your carefully arranged labels and leaves without apologizing. Still, here in the dark, you can feel how natural it would be to wake for a while. Without artificial light, long winter nights could stretch far beyond the body's need for continuous sleep. Imagine sunset arriving in the late afternoon, cold settling early, and sunrise still many hours away. What would people do with all that darkness? They might sleep, wake, talk softly, tend the fire, think, dream, and sleep again. The night wouldn't be wasted. It would simply be lived differently. A man nearby wakes and sits up slowly. His hair catches the faint red glow of the embers. He reaches for a piece of wood and places it carefully on the fire. Not too much, not too little. Firewood matters. You don't burn through the whole supply just because you enjoy ambience. This isn't a boutique cabin rental with complimentary logs and a decorative throw blanket. Each branch was gathered by someone's hands. Each dry stick means effort, foresight, and a little less cold before dawn. The new wood smokes first, then catches. A small flame rises yellow at the tip and blue near the base. The light moves across sleeping faces. You see cheekbones, closed eyes, the curve of a shoulder beneath hide, the rough edge of a stone blade set beside a bundle. The fire creates a circle of safety, but beyond that circle, the world remains large. There's no clock to tell the waking man whether this is midnight, 2 a.m., or some other modern little label. Yet he isn't lost. He reads the night by other signs. The moon has crossed part of the sky. The cold has sharpened. The fire has burned down from flame to coal. His body knows where it is in the dark. This is a lesser-known but lovely detail about time before clocks. Many societies used natural and task-based timekeeping long before mechanical hours became common. People spoke of dawn, dusk, cockcrow, moonrise, the time it took to cook a meal, milk an animal, walk a distance, or burn a candle. In later history, some people even used marked candles or oil lamps to estimate passing time. But here, far earlier, the body and landscape do most of the measuring. You breathe in and feel how different this is from modern sleeplessness. Today, when you wake at night, you may immediately calculate how many hours left, how tired tomorrow, why now, why me? Why did I drink tea at 9:30 like a brave fool? The mind begins building little towers of worry in the dark. But in this older camp, waking isn't automatically a crisis. It's information. It's a small return to awareness. Is the fire low? Is the air colder? Has the wind changed? Is someone nearby restless? Is the body ready to sleep again? Or does it need a few quiet moments? The ancient world isn't easier than yours. It's harsher in many ways. Food is uncertain. Weather is powerful. Injury matters. Darkness can hide danger. And the expectation around sleep may be gentler, because no one imagines the night must be one perfect, uninterrupted performance. You move back toward the fire and sit on a flat stone, still faintly warm from the day. The camp settles again. The man who fed the flames wraps himself and lowers his head. The child stops murmuring. The night bird calls once more, farther away now. Above, the moon slides through thin cloud, and the stars continue their slow, silent turning. Before clocks ruled sleep, humans belonged to a softer kind of time, not easier, not safer, but more porous. You slept, woke, listened, warmed yourself, wondered, and slept again. And somewhere, deep in your own body, beneath schedules and screens and all the tiny glowing rectangles of modern life, that older rhythm may still be waiting calm as embers, patient as night. The fire is the center of the night. You can feel this before you understand it. The whole camp seems arranged around the glow knot, in a perfect circle, because ancient people aren't decorating a showroom, but in a loose, practical pattern shaped by warmth, smoke, wind, and habit. Bodies lie where heat reaches without burning. Tools rest where hands can find them. Hides are angled to block the cold air that slips down from the darker slopes beyond the trees. This is the campfire's gentle circle, and as you sit within it, you begin to sense how much human life has gathered around flames for a very long time. The historical background matters here. 50,000 years ago, people had no houses in the modern sense, no chimneys, no iron stoves, no central heating, and certainly no little thermostat that lets you complain because the room is 1 degree too cool. Shelter depended on landscape and skill. A group might use a cave mouth, a rock overhang, a windbreak made from branches, or a temporary structure of wood, hide, bone, and grass. Fire helped transform those places. It gave warmth, light, protection, a place to cook, a place to gather, and a reason to stay close when the world outside became difficult to read. A mainstream historical fact rests quietly in the ashes. Humans were using fire long before 50,000 years ago. Evidence for controlled fire use appears far earlier in the human story, though scholars still debate when regular, habitual fire control became widespread. By the time of early modern humans in Ice Age landscapes, fire was an essential technology. It wasn't just a dramatic symbol. It was daily work. It needed fuel, knowledge, tending, and respect. You watch the flames move through a small stack of wood. They bend and straighten. They lick at the bark, then sink inward as the branch darkens. The light touches the ground in a trembling circle. Beyond that circle, everything becomes uncertain. A tree trunk appears, disappears, then appears again when a flame rises. The edge of a hide shelter looks like a crouched animal for a moment, then only leather and shadow. The night enjoys tricks like this. It has had a lot of practice. You hear the quiet sounds of people sleeping, slow breathing, a soft cough, the rustle of someone shifting under a covering. Smoke moves low for a moment and carries the smell of resin, ash, cooked fat, and damp, woolly hide. Your eyes water slightly, and you understand one small inconvenience of prehistoric comfort. The fire warms you, yes, but it also follows you with smoke, like a socially awkward guest who really wants to continue the conversation. Near the embers, A young person sits awake, perhaps not fully grown but old enough to have duties. They hold a stick and watch the fire with serious attention. This isn't a grand, heroic pose. It's ordinary. Ordinary things are often the most important in history. Keeping a flame alive through the night can mean easier warmth in the morning. It can mean safety. It can mean cooked food without the slow frustration of starting fire again in cold air. A lesser-known detail hides in this simple act. Archaeologists study. Ancient hearths sometimes find patterns of ash, charcoal, burned bone, and heat-altered stones that suggest fires were used repeatedly in the same places. A hearth can become a kind of memory in the ground. Long after voices vanish and footsteps fade, the soil itself keeps a faint record of where people gathered, cooked, worked, and warmed their hands. It's a quiet archive written in charcoal instead of ink. The young firekeeper nudges one branch closer to the heat. Sparks rise, tiny and brief. The sparks remind you of stars. Or perhaps the stars remind you of sparks. It's hard to tell in a night this old. Around the circle, sleep isn't isolated. In your world, sleep often happens behind doors, under private blankets, beside personal devices guarded by alarms and preferences. Here, sleep belongs to the group. One person's waking can protect another person's rest. One person tending fire allows others to sink deeper. The group becomes a shared body, breathing in pieces, waking in turns, listening from different edges of the same darkness. Some historians suggest that the social life of fire may have shaped human storytelling, while others disagree about how directly we can connect flames to language, myth, and imagination. Researchers remain cautious because the deep past doesn't hand over evidence neatly wrapped and labeled. Still, it's easy to sit here and see why firelight would invite speech. The day has ended. Hands are less busy. Faces are visible in the glow. The world beyond the flames is hidden, and hidden things tend to make stories grow. You hear a murmur from the far side of the hearth. Two adults are awake now, speaking softly. Their words aren't available to you, but the music of them is gentle. One points briefly toward the darkness, perhaps recalling a trail, a herd, a patch of good stone, a tree heavy with fruit in warmer months. The other listens and gives a low sound of agreement. Their voices don't disturb the sleepers. They settle over the camp, like another layer of warmth. The fire also changes what night means. Without it, darkness presses close. With it, humans make a small island of day. Not full day, of course nothing, so bold more like a pocket of amber time, where hands can still work and eyes can still meet. A stone point can be checked. A torn hide can be examined. A child can be comforted. A dream can be told before it dissolves. You lean closer and feel heat on your palms. The skin tightens slightly in the dry warmth. Behind you, the air remains cold enough to touch your neck. This contrast is one of the oldest comforts. Fire in front, night behind, body balanced between danger and rest. And yet fire is not magic. It doesn't erase fear. It doesn't guarantee safety. It must be fed. It can burn, smoke, fail, or attract attention. It's a companion with demands. The people here know this. They treat it neither casually nor with theatrical awe. They live with it. That may be the deepest kind of respect. The young firekeeper's eyes grow heavy. Another sleeper opens their eyes, sensing the small change before any word is spoken. They shift, sit up, and take the stick. There's no ceremony, no announcement, no dramatic changing of the guard. Just a hand, a glance, a shared understanding. The night continues. You watch this quiet exchange and think of your own waking hours. Perhaps, when you open your eyes at night, your body isn't always trying to betray you. Perhaps it's listening for an old fire. Perhaps it's checking the edge of the circle, asking if the warmth remains, if the group is safe, if the dark has changed. The flames settle lower again. The circle softens. Sleep returns in small waves, moving from one person to another. Smoke rises into the starry sky, carrying the scent of ancient wood, and you remain there beside the hearth, held gently in the oldest room humans ever made. The fire burns lower now, not weak exactly, but quieter, softer around the edges, the bright dancing flames from I have settled into a deep orange glow, and the camp around you rests beneath layers of shadow and dim light. You can still smell smoke drifting through the cold air, mixed with earth, damp bark, and the faint scent of animal hide, drying near the warmth. You sit awake beside the embers while most of the group sleeps, and slowly you begin to understand something important about ancient nights. People didn't simply fear the darkness. They listened to it. You hear the sounds one by one. Wind moving gently through branches, a distant crack somewhere in the forest, insects humming in uneven rhythms, the rustle of grass brushing against itself, somewhere far away water moving over stone. Each sound arrives separately, carrying information. 50,000 years ago, paying attention at night could matter deeply. Human groups lived close to the landscape in ways that are difficult for many modern people to imagine. There were no locked doors, motion sensors, floodlights, or emergency phone calls waiting. Ting quietly in your pocket. Awareness itself was a survival tool. Archaeological and anthropological research suggests that prehistoric humans developed strong observational habits connected to weather, animal movement, seasonal changes, and sound. Hunters tracked tiny disturbances in soil. Gatherers noticed plant cycles and subtle shifts in the landscape. At night, those same senses didn't simply switch off. You glance toward the darkness beyond camp. At first it appears empty. Then your eyes slowly adjust a line of pale stones, thin trees, a fallen branch, the faint silver edge of moonlight touching taller grass farther away. The world is still there, only quieter. One of the sleepers nearby stirs. A woman opens her eyes halfway, listening before fully waking. Her breathing pauses briefly. You realize she's not alarmed. She's checking the night almost automatically, the way modern people sometimes check the time without thinking. After a few calm seconds, she closes her eyes again and settles deeper beneath her covering. This kind of waking may have served an important purpose. Modern sleep researchers studying small-scale societies have observed that sleep can remain lighter and more flexible in environments without artificial protection. In some communities, people wake periodically throughout the night, often without distress. Researchers continue examining whether these patterns reflect ancient human tendencies or simply responses to specific environmental conditions. The evidence is still incomplete, but the possibility lingers quietly in the dark. You hear another sound, a low snapping noise from somewhere beyond the firelight. Immediately, one of the older men opens his eyes. Not dramatically. Not like someone in a movie who suddenly sits upright, ready to wrestle a tiger with bare hands, while orchestral music explodes in the background. Real alertness is quieter than that. He simply becomes awake. His face remains calm as he listens. The entire camp seems to pause with him. Then, after several moments, the tension fades. Perhaps it was only a branch settling under cold air. Perhaps a small animal passed through brush beyond the camp. Either way, danger hasn't arrived. The man shifts slightly closer to the fire and relaxes again. You begin to understand why humans may never have evolved to sleep like completely unconscious creatures. Deep sleep is useful. Of course, the body repairs itself there. Memory strengthens there. But absolute helplessness through every hour of darkness might not have served ancient communities particularly well. One fascinating detail from sleep science involves something called the sentinel hypothesis. Some researchers studying traditional groups noticed that not everyone slept deeply at the same time. In certain communities, at least one person often remained partially awake during the night. Experts still discuss how universal this behavior might have been, but the idea itself feels strangely familiar here. Beside the fire, the group protects itself not through rigid shifts or military organization, but through overlapping wakefulness. One person wakes briefly, another turns in sleep. Someone feeds the fire, someone listens, someone dreams. The circle remains aware. The moon has climbed higher now, pale and distant behind thin cloud. Its light spreads faintly across the landscape enough to soften the darkness without defeating it entirely. You notice how much easier movement becomes beneath moonlight. Rocks and paths gain edges again, trees separate from shadow. Ancient travelers likely understood lunar cycles with extraordinary familiarity because moonlight changed what humans could safely do after sunset. Some anthropologists believe that bright moon phases may even have influenced hunting, gathering, travel, and social activity. Others caution that evidence varies widely across environments and cultures. Human life has never followed one single pattern everywhere. Still, standing here, beneath the sky, you can easily imagine how the moon became important long before written calendars existed. The cold deepens. You pull your covering tighter around your shoulders. The air against your face feels sharp and clean, carrying traces of pine, ash, and distant water. Nearby, the fire crackles softly as sap trapped inside wood expands in the heat. Across the camp, a child wakes and makes a small, unhappy sound. Immediately, another body shifts beside them. A hand rests gently against the child's arm. No words are needed. The child settles again. This simple moment carries enormous historical weight. Human children are unusually dependent compared to many animals. They require long periods of care, protection, warmth, and teaching. Cooperative caregiving likely shaped human social life across thousands of generations. Night waking would naturally become part of that experience. Today, parents pacing dark hallways with sleepy children sometimes feel uniquely exhausted, as thou. Nature has personally targeted them for destruction. But the truth is much older and strangely comforting. Across countless ancient nights, people soothed crying children beside fires while wind moved through trees and stars turned overhead. You watch sparks rise upward again. For a second, they drift beautifully into darkness before disappearing completely. The night remains alert, but not frightening. That distinction matters. Modern life often teaches people to fear wakefulness itself. If you wake at 2 a.m., your mind may immediately begin building anxious little stories. Something is wrong. Tomorrow is ruined. Sleep has failed. But here, among these ancient sleepers, waking is woven naturally into the fabric of darkness. You listen, you breathe, you check the edge of the world, and then when the body's ready, you rest again. The embers glow steadily now, casting low red light across sleeping faces. Somewhere beyond camp, an owl calls once into the cold night air. The sound drifts through the trees, soft and ancient, while above you the stars continue their silent motion across the enormous prehistoric sky. Moonlight changes the ancient ground. At first you notice only that the darkness has softened. The camp is still mostly asleep, still held close around the red heart of the fire. But beyond the embers, the world no longer feels like one solid wall of black. Pale light has begun to rest on stones, branches, and the backs of distant grasses. The moon has risen clear of the thin cloud, and everything beneath it seems quieter, colder, and more watchful. You step carefully away from the sleeping circle. The air touches your face with a dry chill. Underfoot, the ground is uneven, pressed by old paths, not paths in the modern sense, not roads or trails with signs helpfully telling you where to buy snacks. They're only repeated choices. A gap between bushes, a flatter line beside stones, a place where feet have passed before, in a world without lamps, roads, or water. Iton maps, moonlight matters. It changes what people can do after sunset. On a dark night, movement beyond the fire may be cautious and limited. On a bright, moonlit night, the land opens slightly. You can see the edge of a ravine, the pale curve of a river, the dark line of trees, the glimmer of frost or dew on grass. Your eyes don't see as clearly as they would in daylight, of course, but they see enough. Long before cities and calendars, humans lived by repeated signs in the sky. The moon grew, shrank, vanished, and returned. Its cycle was visible, dependable, and impossible to ignore. Archaeological evidence from later Ice Age cultures suggests that some people marked cycles of time on bone or stone objects, though the meaning of many markings remains uncertain. Not every scratch is a calendar, despite how tempting it is for modern minds to give ancient people stationary habits. Still, the sky clearly offered rhythm. You walk slowly, keeping the fire behind you. The moonlight cat key. He's on a patch of damp leaves. They shine silver for a moment. Somewhere a small animal moves through brush, quick and light. You hear it before you see the grass tremble. The sound fades. The night returns to its soft breathing. For early humans, the moon wasn't romantic background scenery. It was practical. A fuller moon could make travel easier. It could help people notice animals moving across open ground. It could allow quiet tasks near camp without using precious fuel. It may have shaped when groups chose to move, gather, hunt, or remain close to shelter. Some researchers propose that lunar phases influenced prehistoric behavior, while others remain cautious because direct evidence is difficult to prove across such vast time. A bright moon doesn't leave a fossil. It doesn't fall neatly into a dig site with a label reading, "Used for gentle midnight walking." But if you stand here under its pale light, you can feel the possibility. The moon lays a path across the landscape. You follow. Oh, it's just far enough to see the camp from outside. The fire appears small now, a warm red pulse among dark shapes. The sleeping people are nearly invisible, except when the embers brighten and reveal a shoulder, a face, the curve of a shelter frame. Smoke rises in a thin column, then bends with the wind. There's something deeply human about seeing home as a light in darkness. Even now, thousands of generations later, a lit window seen from a cold street can feel like safety. A bedside lamp can make a room less lonely. A phone screen can become a tiny false moon, though admittedly one that also tells you troubling news and tries to sell you socks. The older comfort is simpler. Fire behind you, moon above you, ground beneath you, people nearby. You look up. The moon isn't full, but bright enough. Its surface appears smooth from here, though you know it's scarred with craters and ancient impacts. To the people around this camp, it may be a presence, a marker, a mystery, perhaps a character. In stories told near the fire, we can't know exactly what they believed. Their thoughts haven't survived in writing, but the repeated attention humans give to the night sky in later cultures suggests that wonder is very old. An unusual detail from deep prehistory is that some caves used by Ice Age people contain art placed far from daylight, in chambers where people needed lamps or torches to see. These painted or engraved places came later in some regions than the moment you're visiting. But they remind us that darkness itself became part of human experience, not just something to avoid. People entered dark spaces with light in their hands and meaning in their minds. You pause near a low rock. Its surface is cold when you touch it. The moon gives it a pale edge. A few small plants grow beside it, leaves curled against the night. The smell here is different from camp, less smoky, more mineral, with a faint wetness from the ground. Behind you, someone wakes. You hear a soft movement, in the quiet crunch of steps. A young adult has risen from the camp and now walks toward the same moonlit opening, wrapping a hide around their shoulders. They don't speak. You stand aside as they look out across the land. Perhaps they're checking the weather. Perhaps they're relieving themselves at a polite distance from everyone else, because some practical needs have been with humanity for a very long time and rarely receive the poetic treatment they deserve. Perhaps they simply woke and wanted to look. The moonlight rests on their face. For a moment, they seem to be listening not only to the land but to the sky. This is where waking at night becomes more than survival. It becomes awareness. In the quiet hours, when most of the group sleeps and the day's tasks have loosened their grip, the mind may wander. It may remember. It may connect the moon's shape with the last time it appeared this way. It may think of animals seen near water, of fruit ripening, of cold returning, of a path tea. Akin once and not forgotten. Memory and moonlight make good companions. The person turns back toward camp. You follow slowly. The fire has brightened again. Someone must have fed it while you were away. The circle of sleepers looks warmer now, touched by orange below and silver above. A child has rolled close against an adult. The old man from earlier lies still, but one eye opens briefly as the returning figure approaches. Recognition passes silently. No alarm, only awareness. You settle again near the edge of the hearth. The moon continues its slow crossing. It has no concern for your schedule, your worries, your unfinished list, or the fact that your pillow at home somehow becomes less comfortable exactly when you need it most. It moves as it always has, steady and pale over sleeping animals, waking humans, frozen rivers, warm fires, and the long turning world. And beneath it, the ancient camp breathes. Some sleep, some wake, some listen, some dream. The night is not empty. It is written. T10 in silver and shadow and your body, even now, may still remember how to read a few faint lines. The cold arrives slowly at first. You notice it in your hands before anywhere else. The warmth from the fire still reaches your face and chest, but your fingers begin to stiffen whenever you move them away from the glow. The air carries a sharper edge now, and the ground beneath the sleeping camp releases the day's remaining warmth into the dark sky above. Around you, people shift closer together, not dramatically. No one announces, "Attention, everyone, temperatures are dropping." Ancient humans didn't require committee meetings for obvious weather developments. Bodies simply move where warmth exists. A shoulder presses nearer another shoulder. A child curls tighter against an adult. Someone pulls a hide over exposed feet. And in these small movements, you begin to understand how deeply human sleep has always depended on shared warmth. 50,000 years ago, surviving cold nights demanded constant adaptation. Ice Age climates varied across regions, but many early humans faced harsh seasonal temperatures, especially after moving into colder parts of Eurasia. Evidence from archaeological sites reveals that people used animal hides, layered coverings, controlled fire, shelters, and body heat to endure freezing conditions. They weren't casually strolling through snow in fashionable little fur capes while discussing philosophy. Cold shaped nearly every decision. You sit near the edge of the camp and feel frost beginning to form on nearby stones. The moonlight gives the frost a pale shimmer. Your breath appears briefly in front of you, soft white, against the darkness. The fire cracks quietly. Someone feeds it another branch. The smell changes instantly. Fresh wood releases a sweeter scent into the air, sharp with resin and sap. Smoke drifts low through the camp before rising into the night. The shelters nearby are simple but carefully arranged. Branches lean together to be free. The wind. Animal skins cover openings. Grass and leaves soften the ground beneath sleeping bodies. Some archaeological discoveries suggest that prehistoric humans may have used plant bedding surprisingly early. Excavations at certain ancient sites have uncovered traces of grasses and layered plant materials that may have helped create softer, warmer sleeping areas. Honestly, after lying on frozen dirt for several nights, even a pile of dry grass probably feels like luxury beyond imagination. You kneel beside one sleeping place and touch the edge of a hide. The surface feels rough in some places, softer in others, where repeated use has worn it smooth. It carries the smell of smoke, oil, animal fat, and winter air. These coverings are valuable. Every hide represents hunting, scraping, drying, cleaning, and careful use. Nothing here is disposable. Nearby, an older woman wakes slowly and adjusts the covering over a child. Her movements are practiced and gentle. She tucks the hide benyat, the child's shoulder, to stop cold air from slipping inside. Then she remains awake for a few moments, not anxious, just listening. The cold changes sleep itself. In freezing conditions, humans may wake more often as the body reacts to shifting temperature, fading firelight, or discomfort. Modern sleep scientists have observed that temperature strongly affects sleep cycles even now. Your own body still lowers its internal temperature slightly before sleep, a very ancient rhythm continuing quietly beneath blankets, heated apartments, and aggressively overpriced mattresses. The woman rubs her hands together near the fire. You can hear the faint, dry sound of skin against skin. Her face catches the ember glow, while the rest of the camp remains dim and silver beneath the moon. Beyond the warmth circle, the darkness appears colder somehow, almost blue at its edges. One fascinating detail from studies of traditional societies is how commonly people sleep in groups rather than alone. Through much of human history, solitary sleep would have been unusual for many people. Shared sleeping spaces conserved warmth, increased safety, and reinforced social bonds. Privacy, at least in the modern sense, is a fairly recent luxury. Today, many people can't sleep unless the room is perfectly silent, perfectly dark, perfectly cool, perfectly adjusted to highly specific conditions involving white noise machines, memory foam technology, and perhaps emotional support pillows. Here, sleep is more flexible because it has to be. You hear someone snore softly nearby. A child shifts and briefly presses cold feet against another sleeper, who reacts with the universal human response to icy feet touching skin in the middle of the night. Even across 50,000 years, some experiences remain timeless. The firekeeper from earlier adds another piece of wood. You watch carefully this time. The branch isn't thrown carelessly into the flames. It's placed with attention, so the embers catch gradually. Phew. L must last until dawn. Fire management is part patience, part experience. Too much wood burns wastefully. Too little risks losing heat entirely before morning. Researchers studying prehistoric hearths have noticed that some ancient fire sites show remarkable consistency over long periods of use. Certain camps returned again and again to the same sheltered locations, rebuilding warmth in familiar places across generations. The landscape itself became layered with memory. You imagine winters passing this snow beyond the shelter, cold wind pressing against hides, the smell of smoke trapped in clothing and hair, long dark evenings spent close together while sparks drift upward into blackness. The cold outside the circle would have sharpened the value of companionship inside it. You settle closer to the embers yourself. The heat reaches your knees first. Your back remains chilled. It's impossible to become evenly warm beside an ancient fire. One side of you belongs to comfort, while the other still belongs to the night. And perhaps this unevenness shaped human sleep, too. People may have turned often, shifted often, woken briefly to warm, numb hands, or pulled coverings tighter. Sleep wasn't necessarily one smooth, uninterrupted descent into oblivion. It moved in layers, interrupted gently by weather, sounds, violent dreams, and the simple reality of being a living body outdoors. A low wind moves through camp. Dry hides rustle softly. The flames lean sideways for a moment before straightening again. Across the fire, two people wake almost at the same time. One glances upward at the sky, perhaps judging how much night remains before dawn. The other rubs their arms against the cold and leans toward the warmth. Neither seems upset about waking. Their bodies respond naturally to the changing night. This calm acceptance feels strangely distant from modern insomnia. Now, if you wake cold at 3 a.m., you might immediately begin negotiating with blankets like a desperate DI. Plamat, attempting peace talks between your freezing feet and the laws of thermodynamics. But here, waking is simply part of maintaining comfort and awareness in a difficult environment. The woman beside the child finally lowers herself again. The child breathes steadily. The old man near the fire shifts closer to another sleeper, sharing warmth without ceremony. The movement is small, almost unconscious. Above the camp, stars remain brilliant and sharp. The moonlight touches the frost. The fire glows red and gold against the endless dark, and slowly wrapped in smoky breath and shared human warmth, the camp settles once more into sleep beneath the ancient cold night. The fire has fallen into a softer rhythm now. Most of the flames are gone, replaced by long, glowing embers that pulse red beneath pale ash. Every so often, a pocket of heat releases itself with a quiet crackle, and tiny sparks drift upward before vanishing into the cold air. The camp sleeps around you in layers of shadow, and warmth, wrapped in hides, woven grasses, and the slow breathing of exhausted bodies. Above, the stars remain sharp and endless, and somewhere between the fading firelight and the enormous night sky, dreams begin to move through the camp. You lie back near the edge of the warmth and watch smoke twist upward into darkness. Your eyes grow heavy for a moment, then open again. Around you, people drift through sleep in uneven waves. One sleeper twitches slightly. Another murmurs something too soft to understand. A child's hand curls against a folded hide. The ancient night is full of dreaming. No written record survives from these distant people. Of course, nobody left behind a neat explanation of what dreams meant to them while sitting beside a cave wall with a helpful charcoal diagram. But human imagination is far older than writing. Long before cities or kingdoms appeared, people already carried stories, fears, memories, symbols, and inner worlds inside their sleeping minds. You star. Enter into the embers and think about how strange dreams must have felt in a prehistoric world. Even now, dreams can seem convincing. A voice feels real. A place feels real. You wake with emotion already inside your chest before logic catches up. But imagine living without modern neuroscience, without psychological language, without screens flooding your senses all day long. Dreams might feel less like random mental leftovers and more like experiences crossing into ordinary life. Some of the oldest known human art hints at symbolic thinking deep in prehistory. Ice Age cave paintings, carved figures, decorated tools, and ritual objects suggest that humans were already exploring imagination and meaning tens of thousands of years ago. The exact purpose of these creations remains uncertain. Some may relate to storytelling, memory, spiritual beliefs, teaching, hunting traditions, or social identity. Others may have carried meanings now completely lost. The camp around you shifts quietly. A NG man sleeping near the fire suddenly wakes with a sharp breath. His eyes open wide for a moment, as though he has returned from somewhere far away. He looks around slowly, orienting himself to the fire, the sleeping bodies, the cold air. Then he exhales. The tension leaves his face. You wonder what he saw. Perhaps a hunt replayed itself in his sleeping mind. Perhaps he dreamed of running animals, rushing water, falling snow, or the faces of absent people. Perhaps dreams already carried fears and hopes much like modern dreams do now. One curious detail from sleep research is that vivid dreaming often increases when sleep becomes lighter or interrupted. If prehistoric humans experienced segmented sleep or frequent nighttime waking, they may also have remembered dreams more often than many modern sleepers. A dream interrupted halfway through can cling to the mind like smoke trapped in clothing. The young man rubs his eyes and leans closer to the warmth. For several minutes he remains ache, staring into the embers. Nobody questions this. The camp accepts waking as naturally as sleeping. The smell of ash hangs low in the air. Somewhere beyond camp, wind brushes through dry branches with a sound like distant whispering. The temperature has dropped further now. Frost gathers along the edges of stones and stiff grass. You pull your covering tighter around yourself. The rough hide scratches lightly against your wrist. Its warmth is uneven but comforting. Nearby, one of the older women shifts in sleep and begins softly humming without fully waking a low, repetitive sound that rises and falls, almost like breathing itself. Perhaps songs belong to the night, very early in human history. Researchers studying traditional oral cultures often note how memory, rhythm, storytelling, and repetition become powerful tools in societies without writing. Around fires in darkness, beneath stars, spoken words carry knowledge across generations. You can imagine ancient people telling stories softly during periods of wakefulness, between sleep cycles, passing along warnings, hunting memories, landscapes, family histories, and myths. And dreams likely blended into those stories. In many later human cultures, dreams became mess. Ages, warnings, prophecies, conversations with ancestors, or reflections of hidden emotions. There's no reason to assume prehistoric humans lacked imagination. If anything, their world may have encouraged it more strongly. The boundary between waking and dreaming probably felt softer in a landscape ruled by darkness, firelight, weather, and enormous skies. You glance upward again. The stars seem impossibly bright now. Without electric light, the human eye adapts deeply to darkness. Modern people rarely experience true night anymore. Even when you think a room is dark, there's usually a glowing router, a blinking charger, a street lamp outside, or some mysterious electronic dot silently judging your sleep quality from across the room. Here, darkness is complete beyond the fire, and because of that, dreams may feel closer somehow. A child nearby begins speaking softly in sleep. The words are unclear, broken into fragments and sounds. An adult beside them places a hand gently against their shoulder without waking fully. The child quiets again. The simple tenderness of the gesture settles over the camp. Human beings have likely comforted sleeping children this way for thousands upon thousands of years. Long before written lullabies, before bedrooms painted in soft colors, before stuffed animals and nightlights, there were hands resting calmly in the dark, beside small, frightened dreams. You feel your own eyelids growing heavier. The firelight flickers across the inside of your vision. When you close your eyes briefly, red and gold shapes drift behind the darkness. The sounds around you blend together now: crackling wood, breathing, wind, a distant animal call softened by distance. Sleep here doesn't arrive like flipping a switch. It comes gradually. You drift near it, return from it, hover beside it, and in these quiet middle hours, waking no longer feels unnatural. The young man across the fire has fallen asleep again, his head lowered against folded arms. The older woman. Man's humming fades into silence. One ember collapses inward softly, sending a brief pulse of orange light across nearby faces. Above the camp, the moon continues westward. The stars wheel slowly through the enormous sky. And somewhere inside the sleeping minds gathered around this ancient fire, dreams continue to wander through forests, rivers, memory, fear, longing, and the endless dark landscapes of early human imagination. The first voices come softly, not loud enough to wake the whole camp, and not shaped for performance. They're the kind of voices people use when darkness is still close and sleep hasn't entirely left the body. Low, warm, half-whispered. The fire is only embers now, but the glow is enough to catch the sides of faces and turn eyes briefly amber. You sit near the hearth while two people wake across from you. One is the older woman who tended the child earlier. The other is a younger man wrapped tightly in a hide with his knees drawn close to his chest. For a while I say nothing. They simply share the silence. Then the younger man gestures toward the edge of camp, where the moonlight lies pale on the ground. The older woman answers with a few quiet words. You can't understand the language, but you can understand the shape of the moment. They're talking because they're awake. That sounds simple, almost too simple, but it matters. In a world without written messages, printed books, radios, televisions, or late night scrolling through arguments between strangers, speech is one of the great human technologies. Around fires, through darkness, across long generations, people carried memory by voice. By 50,000 years ago, humans almost certainly had rich communication. Though the exact origins of language reach back into a misty place where bones and tools can only tell part of the story, the anatomy of the vocal tract, the complexity of cooperation, symbolic objects, and shared planning all point toward powerful social communication among early modern Answer. The exact timeline remains difficult to pin down because spoken words vanish into air convenient for conversation, deeply inconvenient for archaeologists. The younger man speaks again, quieter this time. The older woman listens with her head slightly tilted. Her face holds the patience of someone who has heard many worries in the dark. Perhaps he's speaking of a trail they will follow tomorrow. Perhaps of animals seen near water. Perhaps of a dream that unsettled him, still clinging to his thoughts like smoke in hair. Night invites confession. Even now, people say different things after midnight than they would in bright daylight. The mind loosens. The world becomes smaller. You're less likely to make a speech and more likely to murmur one true thing into the dark. Ancient people must have known this, too, not as a theory, but as a feeling. The air smells of ash and cold grass. Somewhere behind you, a sleeper turns, and the hide beneath them makes a dry, scraping sound. The fire sea. Softly as a piece of wood collapses inward. A few sparks rise and disappear. The older woman reaches toward the embers with a stick and nudges them together. The glow strengthens just enough to reveal a small bundle beside her. Inside it are bits of stone, perhaps tools or materials saved for morning work. She touches the bundle once as she speaks, as if referring to something practical. One easily missed detail about early human life is how much conversation may have surrounded ordinary tasks. Making tools, preparing hides, gathering plants, teaching children, remembering routes, identifying animal tracks, and planning movement all depended on shared knowledge. A camp was not only a place to sleep. It was a living classroom, workshop, nursery, kitchen, and weather station, all without the benefit of storage bins or a suspiciously cheerful instructional video. You hear a third person wake. An older man opens his eyes and listens without joining in. His face remains half hidden beneath. He's covering. He may be hearing enough to understand, or he may simply find the sound of familiar voices reassuring. After a moment, he closes his eyes again. The younger man gives a small sound that might be laughter. It's not bright daytime laughter. It's quieter, softer, almost hidden in the chest. The older woman responds with a short phrase, and he smiles into the firelight. They... Gentle sarcasm is probably ancient too. You can't prove the joke, but you can feel the rhythm of it. Someone has worried too much. Someone older has reminded him kindly that humans have been worrying too much since before breakfast was invented as a formal concept. Experts often disagree about how directly we can connect prehistoric firelight with storytelling. Some argue that evening gatherings would have encouraged myths, teaching, social bonding, and imagination. Others warn that this is plausible but difficult to demonstrate from physical remains alone. A burned hearth can show where people sat, but not whether someone told a thrilling story about a bear, a foolish cousin, or the mysterious disappearance of the last roasted root. Still, around this small, ancient fire, the idea feels natural. The night has narrowed the world to faces. Daylight spreads attention outward toward food, movement, where danger is, work. Night pulls attention inward toward memory, kinship, dreams, and plans. When people wake in the middle hours, conversation can become a bridge between sleep and morning. You listen as the voices continue. The older woman points upward once, toward the moon's position. The younger man follows her gesture. Perhaps they're estimating how much night remains. Perhaps she's reminding him that dawn is still far away, and that rest is needed. He nods, but doesn't lie down yet. This is another thing the night teaches. There is no hurry. Modern waking often brings immediate pressure. You wake and count hours. You wake and calculate tomorrow. You wake and reach for a device. And suddenly your half-sleeping brain is expected to process weather alerts, bank notifications, and a headline that begins with the word crisis. Frankly, no prehistoric nervous system signed up for that. Here, waking is given space.
You may speak softly.
You may listen. You may warm your hands.
You may return to sleep when sleep returns to you. A child nearby murmurs in a dream, and the older woman glances toward them. The sound passes. The child settles. The conversation resumes, even softer now.
The words themselves disappear into the night, but their presence remains. They are part of the camp's warmth, as necessary in their way as the embers. Humans are social sleepers. Even alone in a modern room, you may still carry that old expectation somewhere in the body. The hope that another breathing presence is nearby, that someone would hear if the night changed. The younger man finally lowers himself onto his side. The older woman stays awake a little longer. She watches the fire run, till the glow steadies, then pulls her covering around her shoulders and rests her head. Her eyes close slowly. The camp grows quiet again, but the silence is different now. It contains the memory of voices. You sit beside the embers and let that thought settle, long before written history, before temples, farms, kings and clocks. Humans woke in the dark and spoke softly to one another. They shared worries, jokes, plans, dreams, and small comforts. They kept each other company inside the enormous night. And as the fire lowers itself into red ash, you feel how ancient that comfort is. To wake is not always to be alone. Sometimes it is simply to hear the first quiet conversation waiting beside the flame. Hunger wakes quietly too. It doesn't always arrive as a sharp pain or dramatic emptiness. Sometimes it comes as a small awareness beneath sleep, a hollow warmth inside the body, a restless turning, a mouth gone dry, a mind drifting toward food even before the eyes open. Near the fire, knee of the sleeper's shifts and presses a hand against his stomach. He doesn't rise at once. He lies still, listening to the camp breathe. The embers glow low beside him, and the cold air has settled thickly around the shelters. Somewhere beyond the trees, night continues its slow work hiding paths, covering stones and keeping the animals of the dark in motion. You sit nearby and feel the quiet truth of this ancient world. Food is never guaranteed. By 50,000 years ago, human groups survived through skilled hunting, gathering, scavenging when possible, fishing in some regions, and deep knowledge of plants, animals, water, and seasons. Their diets varied enormously depending on where they lived. A group near a coast might eat shellfish and fish. A group in colder grasslands might depend more heavily on large animals. Forest dwellers might know roots, nuts, berries, eggs, insects, and edible leaves. There was no single prehistoric menu, and certainly no tidy little meal plan printed on ickled paper. The man opens his eyes for a few moments. He stares into the red light, as if waiting for his body to decide whether waking is worth the effort. Then he sits up slowly and reaches toward a small bundle near his sleeping place. Inside, wrapped carefully in hide, are leftovers from earlier, a strip of dried meat perhaps, a few hard gathered seeds, something roasted and darkened at the edges. He takes only a small piece and chews slowly. There is no abundance here. The taste is likely smoky, tough, earthy, and precious. You can almost hear the effort behind it. The walking, the watching, the gathering, the cutting, the carrying, the sharing. Food in this world is not separate from labor. It is memory made edible. One detail often overlooked in popular images of prehistoric life is how much planning food required. People had to know when plants ripened, where animals migrated, which parts could be eaten safely, how to process tough foods, and how to preserve what they could. Doctor. Ying meat, smoking food, cracking bones for marrow, storing certain items briefly in cool places, and carrying portable foods were all ways of stretching survival across uncertain days. The man chews with his eyes half closed. Another person wakes beside him, probably disturbed by the movement rather than hunger. They exchange a low murmur. He offers a small piece. The other refuses at first, then accepts a tiny bite. Even at night, food carries social meaning. Sharing is not decorative. It binds the group together. The fire releases a little sigh as ash shifts. You smell the remains of the evening meal in the hearth-cooked fat, burned bone, charred plant fibers. Smoke has folded itself into everything. Hair, hides, tools, skin. The whole camp smells faintly roasted, which is probably not ideal by modern laundry standards, but excellent for reminding everyone that warmth and food have recently existed. Food and sleep are closely connected even now. A heavy meal can make you drowsy. An empty stomach can wake you. Blood sugar, digestion, hormones, and temperature all move through the night in quiet rhythms. For ancient humans, those rhythms were tied to real uncertainty. Some days may have brought plenty, other days little. The body learned flexibility because life demanded it. There's still disagreement among researchers about how often prehistoric people experienced hunger. Older stereotypes imagined early humans living in constant starvation, always desperate, always chewing sadly on roots. More recent views are more balanced. Some hunter-gatherer groups in favorable environments could enjoy varied diets and periods of relative plenty, but shortages, seasonal stress, failed hunts, injury, drought, and harsh winters could make food unreliable. The past was neither endless misery nor a peaceful picnic with better stars. The man finishes chewing and wraps the remaining food again. Carefully, very carefully. You notice how his fingers press the hide closed, protecting. Even a small scrap from dirt, insects, or curious children who might wake and discover an exciting midnight snack opportunity. Some things never change. Nearby, an older woman opens one eye. She sees what he's doing and makes a soft sound, not scolding exactly, but perhaps reminding him not to eat too much before morning. He gives a tiny shrug, the ancient ancestor of every person who has ever stood in front of a refrigerator at 2 a.m. pretending they're making a rational decision. The woman closes her eye. Again. You smile quietly. The night becomes still once more, but hunger lingers as a presence. Not frightening in this moment, just part of the camp's awareness. It shapes dreams. It shapes plans.
It shapes where the group will go at dawn.
The people here may already be thinking ahead, even in sleep.
Tracks seen yesterday, berries remembered near a stream, birds gathering in one direction, a herd moving across distant ground.
The next meal begins in the mind before morning light tea. Ouches the horizon. You look beyond the fire, toward the dark land. Somewhere out there are sleeping animals, hidden nests, frozen roots, edible plants waiting under leaves, and dangerous things best left alone. The landscape is a pantry, but not a generous one, with labels and convenient opening hours. It must be read. It must be earned. The man lies down again. His hunger isn't gone, but softened. He pulls his covering up and turns toward the heat. His breathing slows. The small bite has comforted the body just enough to let sleep return. You remain awake a little longer, listening. A distant rustle moves through the grass, then fades. The moonlight has shifted, leaving part of the camp darker than before. The fire's glow is low and steady, like a thought almost asleep. And you understand something gentle about your own restless nights. Sometimes the body wakes because it is worried, sometimes because it is cold, sometimes because the mind has carried too much noise into bed, and sometimes, far beneath language, the body is still an ancient keeper of needs: warmth, safety, food, water, company, rest. It checks, it asks, it listens. Then when enough has been answered, it lets you drift again. Beside the embers, the hungry man sleeps. The hidden food bundle rests near his hand. The camp breathes softly around him, surrounded by darkness, moonlight, and the waiting promise of morning. The sound comes from far beyond the firelight. Low, brief, almost swallowed by the wind. Yet half the camp notices it anyway. You don't see anyone panic. No one leaps dramatically to their feet, clutching a spear, while heroic music explodes from nowhere. The reaction is quieter than that, more ancient. Several sleepers open their eyes at nearly the same time. One person lifts their head slightly. Another shifts closer to the embers without fully waking. The human body listens even during sleep. That may be one of the oldest survival habits you still carry. The call comes again, distant, TH. Is time not close enough to threaten the camp, but near enough to matter? Somewhere out in the darkness, an animal is moving through the frozen landscape beneath the moon. You sit still and listen with them. The fire gives off a faint hiss where sap burns inside a branch. Smoke drifts low across the ground before lifting toward the stars. Frost has formed along the edges of the shelters, and the cold air feels sharper inside your nose each time you breathe. The people around you know this land well. They know which sounds belong to harmless night movement and which demand attention. A breaking branch may mean little. A sudden silence among insects may mean more. A howl carried across open ground might reveal distance and even direction. Long before humans built walls or locked doors, awareness served as protection. Predators during the Ice Age varied depending on region, but many landscapes contained dangerous animals. Cave lions, wolves, hyenas, bears, and large cats shared territory. With human groups in some parts of Eurasia, humans were intelligent and cooperative, but they weren't invincible. Night required caution. You glance toward the darkness beyond camp. The moonlight reaches only so far before trees and uneven ground swallow it completely. Somewhere out there are sleeping animals, moving animals, hunting animals. The world beyond the fire remains active while the camp rests. A child nearby shifts closer to an adult. The adult wakes immediately, not fully, just enough. One arm wraps gently around the child before both settle again. You notice how often ancient sleep seems layered rather than absolute. People drift upward into awareness, and then downward again like bodies floating in deep water. Modern studies of sleep in non-industrial societies sometimes show surprisingly flexible nighttime patterns. Sleep can remain responsive to environment, temperature, sound, and social activity. In conditions where danger is possible, total unconsciousness may not always. Wise be the most useful state. The animal calls again. This time the older man near the fire quietly stands. His joints move stiffly from cold and age. He wraps a hide around himself and steps just beyond the circle of light. You hear frost crack softly beneath his feet. He pauses, listening toward the dark valley below the camp. The silence afterward feels enormous. Then he returns calmly to the fire. No danger, at least not tonight. He lowers himself back onto the ground with the careful slowness of someone whose knees have negotiated many winters already. One of the younger adults watches him briefly, then relaxes again. The camp trusts experience. Older people in prehistoric groups may have carried valuable survival knowledge. They remembered migration paths, seasonal weather, safe plants, dangerous places, and animal behavior. Physical strength mattered, of course, but memory mattered too. A person who knew when rivers froze, where predators denned, or how storms moved across country. Tane valleys could help keep others alive. You watch the old man stretch his hands toward the embers. The skin across his knuckles catches the red light. Smoke curls around him, carrying the smell of charred wood and old ash. For several moments, he remains awake alone, staring into the fire with the patient stillness of someone deeply familiar with night. One small but fascinating observation from wildlife research is that many animals sleep lightly in risky environments. Herd animals rotate positions. Birds wake frequently. Mammals remain responsive to sudden sounds. Humans, despite all our technology, still retain pieces of that ancient alertness. A creak in the hallway can wake you instantly at 3 a.m. Even if your ancestors no longer need to worry about cave lions wandering into the kitchen, although, admittedly, some kitchens, after midnight, do feel slightly dangerous. The old man feeds the embers another branch. Flames rise slowly, lighting the nearest faces with golden orange. The warmth spreads outward again across blankets, hides, and sleeping limbs. You hear someone sigh in relief as the heat touches them. Warmth means safety, light means visibility, and visibility changes fear. Beyond the glow, the darkness remains unknowable. Ancient people likely understood that balance intimately. They were neither fearless nor helpless. They adapted. They learned the sounds of their world, the way modern people learn traffic patterns or phone notifications. You realize something quietly comforting. The camp doesn't expect perfect sleep. No one lies awake worrying because they briefly open their eyes. No one checks an invisible clock and calculates disaster. Waking is simply folded into the rhythm of the night. Listen, check the fire, hear the world, rest again. The old man finally settles down. The branch, he added, burns steadily now, sending soft waves of heat into the freezing air. Nearby, one of the younger sleepers rolls over and immediately begins snoring with eye. Impressive confidence. Human dignity during sleep has probably always been limited. A thin wind moves across the camp. You hear hides rustling softly like dry leaves. The moon has lowered slightly now, and the stars near the horizon appear brighter. Somewhere in the far distance, the animal calls one final time before fading completely into silence. The camp remains still, protected not by walls but by awareness, by firelight, by shared sleep, by ears tuned carefully to the dark. You sit beside the embers and let your breathing slow with theirs. The danger beyond the circle never fully disappears, but neither does the calm inside it. Ancient humans survived not because fear vanished, but because they learned how to rest beside uncertainty. And perhaps your own midnight waking still carries a trace of that old inheritance. The body rises briefly from sleep. It listens. It checks the edges of the world. Then, if all's quiet, it returns gently to the warmth. The child wakes before dawn number. Tea fully at first, just enough to whimper softly into the cold air, while the rest of the camp remains wrapped in sleep and fading moonlight. The sound is small, uncertain, somewhere between a dream and a call for comfort. Immediately, someone beside the child stirs. You notice how quickly it happens. No frustration, no confusion. The adult's eyes open halfway, and one arm moves gently across the sleeping bundle. A rough hide is pulled higher around small shoulders. Warmth returns. The child quiets. Then both drift downward again towards sleep. The entire exchange lasts only seconds, and yet scenes like this may have repeated across human history more times than anyone could ever count. The fire has burned low again. Red embers pulse beneath gray ash, sending out thin waves of warmth that barely reach the outer edge of the sleeping circle. Frost whitens nearby grass. Your breath clouds faintly each time you exhale. You sit close to the heat and watch families sleeping together. Children lie beside parents, grandparents, siblings, or other caregivers. Nobody sleeps in a separate nursery, painted with tiny clouds and motivational woodland animals. In prehistoric camps, children remained physically close to adults through the night because closeness offered warmth, feeding, protection, and constant reassurance. Human infants are unusually dependent compared to many mammals. They require years of care before becoming fully independent, and that long childhood helped shape human social life itself. Cooperation became essential. A child might be watched not only by parents, but by older siblings, grandparents, relatives, and trusted members of the group. Even now, traces of that ancient closeness remain in human behavior. Babies calm when hearing breathing nearby. Small children seek warmth and touch during the night. Adults themselves often sleep better when they feel safe and emotionally connected. Beneath all the modern architecture and electric lighting, the nervous system. M still remembers campfire conditions. A little farther across the camp, another child rolls onto their back and begins snoring softly. Tiny prehistoric snoring, probably just as durable and mildly concerning as modern snoring. You smile to yourself. The firekeeper from earlier wakes again and gently shifts a branch into the embers. A few sparks leap upward. Orange light briefly fills the camp, illuminating sleeping faces and tangled hair. The children barely react. They're accustomed to movement, sound, shifting warmth, and quiet nighttime activity. That flexibility may have mattered greatly. Modern sleep environments often train people to expect perfect stillness. Any sound becomes an interruption. Any movement becomes a disturbance. But ancient camps were living spaces shared by many bodies. Someone coughed. Someone rose to tend the fire. Someone soothed a child. Someone returned late from relieving themselves and accidentally stepped on something unpleasant in the dark. Humans lead. Uned to sleep around other humans. Archaeologists studying prehistoric shelters sometimes find evidence suggesting repeated family occupation of the same seasonal spaces. Hearths, tools, food remains, bedding traces, and shared activity areas reveal intimate communal living. Life happened close together, very close together. Privacy in the modern sense barely existed, and yet emotional closeness may have felt stronger because of it. The child nearest you wakes again, this time fully. Large, dark eyes blink toward the firelight. For a moment, the child looks confused, suspended between dream and waking. Then they spot the familiar adult shape beside them and relax immediately. Security returns through recognition. The adult opens one eye and quietly offers a piece of softened hide for the child to hold. The child grips it sleepily against their chest. Perhaps it smells familiar smoke, fur, home. You wonder whether prehistoric children had favorite objects the way modern children treasure. Blankets or stuffed animals. Organic materials rarely survive tens of thousands of years, so archaeology can't easily answer questions like that. But emotionally, the idea feels deeply human. Comfort often gathers around texture, smell, repetition, and touch. The child finally settles again. Nearby, an older woman shifts carefully upright. Her hair catches the ember glow in silver strands. Without speaking, she checks the sleeping children around her one by one. A covering adjusted here. A sleeping arm moved away from cold ground there. Her movements are slow and practiced. Older adults likely played important roles in childcare throughout human history. Some evolutionary researchers even suggest that long human lifespans beyond childbearing years may have helped communities survive by allowing grandparents to assist with knowledge, food gathering, teaching, and protection. You can believe it easily while watching this woman move through the sleeping camp. She notices things younger age. People miss a child too close to dying embers. Cold air slipping through a shelter opening, a sleeping position that will leave someone stiff and miserable by dawn. Nothing dramatic, just quiet competence. The stars above the camp have shifted farther west. Now, the moon hangs lower, thinner behind passing cloud. The darkest hours before dawn feel stretched and suspended, as if time itself has slowed beside the fading fire. You hear soft breathing all around you. A teenager sleeping near the outer edge of camp suddenly pulls their legs closer against the cold without waking fully. One of the adults notices immediately and tosses part of a spare hide across them. Again, no words. The group behaves almost like one shared sleeping organism. This cooperative nighttime behavior appears in many traditional communities observed in more recent centuries. People often wake briefly to care for children, feed fires, check weather, or respond to sounds before returning naturally to rest. Sleep flow. Collectively, rather than individually. The old woman finally lowers herself back down near the child. Before closing her eyes, she gazes briefly into the darkness beyond camp. You follow her gaze. Nothing moves there except the wind brushing faintly through grass. Still, the glance matters. The children sleep because others remain partly awake. That pattern may be one of the oldest forms of human protection. You think about modern nights again, parents rising beside cribs, someone checking on a sick child at midnight, someone pulling blankets higher after hearing a cough down the hallway. These moments can feel exhausting when you live inside them, but they belong to a chain of human care stretching unimaginably far into the past. The fire dims further. Ash settles softly over glowing coals. One child sighs deeply in sleep and presses closer against the warmth of another body. The older woman closes her eyes at last. Around her, the camp rests beneath stars, frost, smoke, and the lonely. Protective rhythm of human companionship. And slowly, as the night deepens toward dawn, you begin to understand that ancient sleep was never truly solitary. It belonged to the group, to warmth, to listening, to care quietly offered in the dark. The elders wake lightly. You notice it as the night thins toward its deepest hour, when the cold feels most settled and the sky seems impossibly still. Around the fire, younger bodies sleep heavily, folded into hides and grass bedding, worn out by walking, gathering, carrying, watching, and all the other quiet labors of survival. But the older people don't sink quite as far. One of them opens his eyes before anyone else moves. He lies still for a long moment, listening with the calm patience of someone who has spent a lifetime learning what the dark is allowed to sound like. The embers glow beside him. Smoke rises in a faint ribbon. Frost silvers the grass beyond the camp. He turns his head slightly. Nothing urgent, only the night. Older members. Ours of early human groups may have carried knowledge that was difficult to replace. In a world without writing, memory lived in people. The safest river crossing, the bitter root that must be soaked before eating. The valley where animals passed after thaw, the stone source several days away, the signs of weather turning dangerous. Such information could shape whether a group moved wisely or suffered for a mistake. You watch the old man sit up carefully. His movement is slow, not from weakness alone, but from economy. He doesn't waste effort. He gathers his covering, shifts closer to the fire, and studies the coals. His face is lined by age, wind, smoke, and winters. In the ember light, each crease seems like a trail on an old map. He lifts a small branch and places it where the heat can reach. The branch darkens, smokes, then catches. Light grows softly across the camp. Nearby, an older woman opens her eyes, too. Perhaps the change in light wakes her. Perhaps she was already near waking. She looks toward the man, then toward the sleeping children, then out into the blue-black edge of the camp. No words pass between them. They don't need many. The old woman adjusts a hide around her shoulders and sits beside him. Together they keep watch not as guards in the formal sense, but as people whose sleep has become part of the group's rhythm. Their waking is not separate from care. There's a quiet theory in human evolution that the presence of elders may have been deeply important to survival. Some researchers connect long human lifespans with the value of grandparents and older adults who helped feed, teach, and protect younger generations. Others are more careful, pointing out that human aging, reproduction, and social structure are complicated, and no single explanation fits every time or place. But in the hush of this camp, the usefulness of age feels easy to see. The old woman reaches for a small tool near her nigh piece of bone or antler smooth from handling. She turns it in her fingers, perhaps checking whether it needs repair when morning comes. The gesture is small, almost absent-minded. Her eyes remain on the edge of darkness while her hands remember work. This is one of those details the past rarely preserves in grand monuments. Older hands doing small tasks in the dark, a point checked, a cord untangled, a hide edge rubbed between fingers, the useful quiet of experience. You listen with them. The camp breathes. A child's someone's stomach makes a soft sound, proving once again that human bodies have never cared about solemn historical atmosphere. The old man hears it and makes a faint, amused noise. The old woman glances at him. A tiny smile passes between them, then fades into the warmth. You can almost feel how many nights they have lived through. Storm nights, hungry nights, warm summer nights, filled with insects. Winter nights when the fire had to be kept alive as if it were another child. Nights after successful hunts when the smell of roasted meat clung to the air. Nights of sickness, grief, birth, fear, laughter, and ordinary sleep. Their bodies have learned not only how to rest, but how to wake without wasting fear. That may be the lesson here. Modern waking often feels lonely because it happens in isolation. You lie in a dark room with your thoughts, and the rest of the world seems sealed away. But in this ancient camp, waking belongs to many people at different times. It is shared across ages. The elders take some of the night into themselves, and by doing so, they let others sleep. The old man leans toward the younger sleepers. One young adult has rowed too far from the heat. Without speaking, the old man reaches out with his foot and nudges a loose hide closer to them. The younger sleeper grabs it without waking and pulls it over their legs. The old man settles back, satisfied. That's not heroic in the usual sense. It's better. It's practical tenderness. A faint wind moves over the camp. The shelters creak softly. Dry branches rub together overhead with a sound like quiet whispering. The old woman raises her face to the air and inhales. Perhaps she's smelling moisture, perhaps smoke direction, perhaps weather. Long before instruments measured pressure or temperature, People read air with their skin, noses, joints, and memory. The scent of rain, the bite of frost, the direction of wind, the behavior of animals, the silence before snow. These were not decorative observations. They were survival information. The old woman murmurs something. The old man listens, then nods. Maybe tomorrow will be colder. Maybe they should move toward a sheltered place. Maybe she's simply commenting that the wind is annoying, which would be fair. Even in the Stone Age, where they probably received many quiet complaints, the fire catches more strongly now. Flames rise just high enough to warm their faces. For a while, the two elders sit together in companionable silence. Their eyes grow heavy, then clear again. Their waking is not rigid. They drift near sleep while remaining open to the world. This is a different kind of alertness from fear. It is steady, it is practiced. It has no need to prove itself. You feel the camp resting inside their awareness. The children sleep deeper because older ears are open. The tired hunters sleep because someone remembers the night's sounds. The younger adults, full of tomorrow's labor, can surrender for a while. And perhaps somewhere inside your own body, a similar inheritance remains. You wake at night and wonder why. Maybe part of you is only listening, as they listened, checking the room, the temperature, the silence, the breathing of those you love, even if those loved ones are in another room, another city, or only present in memory. The old woman finally lowers herself beside the child nearest her. The old man remains upright a few moments longer. He looks into the embers until his eyes soften. Then he too lies down, leaving the branch he placed to be. Earns steadily through the dark. The camp sleeps. The elders sleep, but their knowledge remains around everyone, almost like warmth, almost like another layer of covering against the ancient night. Rain arrives without warning. One moment the night is only cold and still, wrapped in frost and moonlight. The next, you hear the first faint tapping against the leaves above the camp, soft, scattered, almost delicate. Several people wake immediately, not frightened, just attentive. The old man near the fire opens his eyes first, then tilts his face upwards slightly. Another drop lands nearby, darkening the dust beside the embers. Then another strikes the stretched hide covering one of the shelters with a hollow little pat. The rain has begun. You pull your covering closer around your shoulders while the camp slowly stirs beneath the changing sky. The air smells different, already wetter, richer. Earth and bark rising together into the cold darkness. For prehistoric people, weather shaped nearly everything. A hard rain could soak bedding, weaken fire, ruin comfort, blur tracks, chill children, and turn a peaceful night miserable within minutes. Shelter mattered deeply, but shelters during this period were often temporary, flexible, and closely tied to landscape. Some groups used caves or rock overhangs when available. Others built windbreaks and hide structures suited to movement and seasonal travel. You hear hurried but controlled movement around the fire. Someone grabs a loose skin before it becomes soaked. Another person shifts sleeping bundles farther beneath the shelter edge. A younger woman lifts a child against her chest while adjusting the covering above them. Nobody speaks loudly. The rain itself changes the sound of the world. Drops patter across hide, brush, leaves, bare earth, and scattered stone. The forest beyond camp softens into shadow and water. Even the distant animal noises disappear beneath the steady whisper falling from the sky. The fire reacts immediately. Ely. Steam hisses upward where droplets strike hot wood. Smoke thickens, blowing low through camp before curling sideways into darkness. The smell becomes heavier now, wet ash, damp bark, burning resin. You cough quietly as the smoke brushes past your face. Honestly, ancient campfires must have produced equal parts comfort and eye irritation. The old woman from earlier kneels near the embers and carefully rearranges part of the firewood to protect the hottest coals from direct rain. She moves with experience, not rushed, not careless. Her fingers know exactly which pieces must stay dry long before waterproof tents, and weather apps confidently announcing light showers at 2 a.m. Humans learn to read clouds, wind, temperature shifts, and animal behavior for signs of changing weather. Even subtle changes in air pressure can affect joints, breathing, and sleep quality. Some people still notice storms before they arrive. Your body remains older than your technology. The rain strengthens. North. Oh, it drums steadily overhead. One of the shelters begins leaking near the edge, and a teenager, sleeping beneath it, wakes with visible annoyance as cold water lands directly across their forehead. Some human expressions require no translation across 50,000 years. The teenager shifts away while another sleeper quietly laughs into their covering. Even here in deep prehistory, someone else's discomfort remains mildly entertaining. You sit closer to the protected side of the fire. The warmth feels wonderful against the damp cold creeping through the camp. Moisture clings to your clothing. The ground smells alive, now dark and fertile beneath the rain. Nearby grass bends under droplets that catch the ember glow like tiny pieces of glass. Some archaeological sites show evidence that prehistoric people repeatedly repaired and adapted shelters over time. Post holes, arranged stones, animal bones, hide-working tools, and preserved living surfaces all hint at remarkable practical knowledge. These were not random survival attempts. People understood insulation, drainage, wind direction, and seasonal movement far better than modern stereotypes often assume. The child held against the young woman's chest has fallen asleep again despite the weather. Children adapt quickly when comfort remains nearby. The woman rocks gently back and forth while staring into the fire. Rainwater glistens along loose strands of her hair. Smoke drifts around her face in pale grey ribbons. A man from the outer edge of camp suddenly rises and moves toward the trees. For a brief moment, you wonder why anyone would willingly leave the warmth during rain and darkness. Then you remember, even prehistoric humans occasionally had to answer nature's less glamorous demands. History is full of practical interruptions. When he returns soaked and shivering, someone hands him part of a dry covering without comment. He mutters something that causes two nearby sleepers to grin sleepily. Perhaps he slipped in mud. Humani. Ty's long relationship with wet ground probably contains countless forgotten tragedies of dignity. The rain continues steadily. Water gathers along the edges of the shelters before dripping into the earth below. The fire shrinks lower, despite careful tending, and people inch closer together around its remaining warmth. Shared body heat becomes even more important now. You notice how naturally the camp compresses inward during bad weather. Knees nearly touching, shoulders leaning together, children tucked safely between adults. The entire sleeping circle tightens, like a living thing protecting its center. This closeness may have influenced human sleep for tens of thousands of years. Physical proximity calms the nervous system. Breathing synchronizes.
Warmth spreads. Safety becomes collective instead of individual. Modern sleep can feel strangely isolated by comparison.
You lie alone in a temperature-controlled room while artificial light glows under the door and distant traffic hums outside. Yet some part of the body may still long for simpler reassurances. Nearby breathing, shared warmth, firelight flickering across familiar faces while rain taps softly overhead. The storm begins easing after a while not suddenly. The drops thin little by little until individual sounds separate again. Water falling from leaves, moisture dripping from shelter edges, a final light patter against stretched hide. Then silence returns. The air afterward feels cleaner, colder too. Mist hangs low above the ground, silver beneath the moonlight breaking through cloud again. Smoke rises more freely now from the recovering fire. One by one, the camp settles. The teenager with the wet forehead grumbles softly while rearranging bedding. The young mother lowers the sleeping child carefully onto dry grass. The old woman feeds another small branch into the embers and watches it catch. The storm has passed, but the memory of it lingers in the smell of wet earth and smoke. You sit beside the fire, listening to water drip slowly from branches beyond camp. Everything feels quieter after rain, softer somehow, and you realize how often ancient sleep must have changed shape around weather. Humans did not sleep apart from nature. They slept inside it, beneath shifting skies, rising wind, freezing air, sudden storms, and long nights filled with sounds no war could fully keep away. The embers glow steadily again. Steam rises faintly from damp hides drying near the warmth. The camp breathes slowly beneath the clearing sky. And above the trees, the stars begin returning one by one through the fading rain clouds. The darkest part of the night has nearly passed. You can feel it even before the sky changes. The cold has settled into everything now. Stones, grass, hides, hands. The fire burns low and steady after surviving the rain, and thin curls of steam still rise from damp wood stacked near the edge of camp. Around you, most people sleep heavily again, pulled downward by exhaustion after tea. The interruption of weather and cold, but your body remains strangely awake, not anxious, just aware. You sit near the embers while the world holds its breath between midnight and dawn, and you begin to sense something older than memory moving quietly beneath human sleep. Your body keeps time. Not with numbers, not with clocks, with light. Long before people understood biology, the human body had already developed internal rhythms linked to the rising and setting of the sun. Even now, hidden systems inside the brain respond to darkness, temperature, and light exposure. Hormones shift. Alertness rises and falls. Body temperature changes across the night. Sleep itself moves through repeating cycles. You experience those rhythms every day, whether you notice them or not. Ancient people simply lived closer to them. The moonlight over the camp has faded slightly as thin cloud drifts across the sky again. Without artificial lighting, darkness presses more deeply against the senses. Your eyes adapt until even faint shapes become visible the edge of a shelter, a sleeping shoulder, smoke drifting upward. The old man near the fire wakes once more. This time he doesn't sit up immediately. He only opens his eyes and watches the embers for several quiet breaths, as if checking whether the world still exists exactly where he left it. Apparently, it does. A comforting discovery every morning. He rubs one hand slowly across his face and settles back again. The body doesn't sleep evenly through the entire night. Modern sleep science describes repeating stages of deeper and lighter sleep, each with different brain activity and physical effects. You may drift upward toward awareness several times during the night without remembering it. In environments shaped by natural darkness rather than electric light, these rhythms may become even more noticeable. You think about how different this camp feels from modern nighttime life. Today, many people spend evenings beneath bright artificial lighting long after sunset. Screens glow inches from the face. Rooms remain illuminated deep into the night. Entire cities shine so brightly that stars disappear almost completely. The body evolved under firelight and moonlight, yet now falls asleep after staring directly into tiny artificial suns filled with emails and alarming headlines. Frankly, prehistoric humans may have had many hardships, but at least no one climbed into bed and immediately decided to read terrible news for 45 minutes. A breeze moves through camp, carrying the scent of wet earth left behind by the rain. The smell mixes with smoke and cooling ash. Somewhere beyond the trees, water drips steadily from leaves into mud below. You notice several sleepers stirring almost together, not fully awake, just turning, adjusting, breathing differently. One child briefly opens their eyes, then closes them again before awareness fully arrives. A younger adult stretches one leg toward the warmth of the fire without lifting their head. The entire camp seems to move through invisible tides. Human sleep has always been shaped by environment. Temperature, season, firelight, danger, social closeness, food availability, and physical exhaustion all influence rest. In winter, longer nights may naturally encourage more sleep or more segmented sleep. In summer, dawn arrives earlier, and warmth changes the body's rhythms again. Some communities living without widespread electricity today still show sleep patterns closely tied to natural light cycles. People often grow sleepy a few hours after sunset and wake near dawn, though exact habits vary widely depending on climate and culture. There's no single, ancient sleep schedule waiting to be discovered like a lost instruction manual. Human sleep has always been adaptable. That adaptability may be the real inheritance. A faint glow appears low on the horizon. Not sunrise yet, just the first subtle loosening of darkness. You would miss it entirely in a modern city, drowned beneath streetlights and glowing windows. Here, the change feels enormous. The land itself seems to notice. Night insects quiet slightly. A bird gives one uncertain call from somewhere in the trees. The old woman nearest the children opens her eyes almost immediately. You wonder whether age has sharpened her awareness of dawn or simply shortened the depth of her sleep. Either way, she notices the shift before anyone speaks. She lifts her head and listens. The fire pops softly beside her. Nearby, a young sleeper remains deeply unconscious, wrapped completely beneath a hide with only tangled hair visible. Youth sleeps with confidence. Older people sleep with negotiation. The old woman reaches toward the embers and rubs warmth into her fingers. Her hands look worn from years of scraping hides, carrying wood, gathering plants, preparing food, lifting children, and surviving weather. Yet they move carefully and steadily. Familiar work leaves its shape on the body. You glance upward. The stars near the eastern horizon have begun fading slightly. The moon looks paler now, less dominant than before. Soon the camp will wake fully. Voices will rise. The fire will strengthen. People will step out into cold grass and begin another day of movement and labor. But for now, the camp exists in a strange middle place, not fully night, not fully morning. The body seems especially sensitive during these hours. Thoughts drift differently. Dreams cling longer. Sleep becomes lighter and easier to leave behind. Modern people often wake during these early morning hours and assume something has gone wrong. But your body may simply be responding to ancient biological transitions shaped over thousands of generations beneath open skies. The old woman yawns quietly. Another sleeper wakes beside her and immediately pulls their covering tighter. Instead of facing the cold, a timeless human strategy. You hear faint chewing nearby. Someone has found leftover food from earlier and is nibbling cautiously before dawn. Human beings remain remarkably committed to small nighttime snacks across all historical periods. The eastern horizon brightens another shade, very slowly blue, replacing black. The camp begins waking in layers now, just as it slept in layers earlier. One person rises to feed the fire. Another sits up, rubbing stiff shoulders. A child remains asleep despite increasing noise, demonstrating the impressive and mysterious sleep powers possessed only by children and people who claim they can nap anywhere. You remain near the embers, watching the transition unfold. The body's ancient clock continues turning quietly inside every person here. Not perfect, not mechanical, but deeply rooted in light, temperature, hunger, companionship, and the long repeating rhythm of the natural world. And somewhere inside you, beneath modern science, hedgels and electric evenings, that old clock still ticks softly beside the fading fire. The fire is nearly gone when the quiet work begins. Not daytime work, not hunting or gathering or long movement across frozen ground. This belongs to the strange middle hours between deep night and dawn, when some people wake naturally and discover they are not yet ready to sleep again. You sit beside the embers while pale blue slowly gathers at the edge of the world. Most of the camp still rests beneath hides and woven grass, but a few figures remain awake in the dim light. No one seems troubled by it. That's what strikes you most. The waking itself carries no panic. A younger woman sits cross-legged near the warmth, rubbing a cord slowly between her fingers. The fibers twist together carefully, while steam rises from the damp earth around camp. Nearby, the old man sharpens the edge of a stone point with small, precise movements. The sound is faint, but steady. Scratch, pause, scratch again. Tiny nigh. Time tasks dash small, useful things. Human life has always contained them. Without electric lighting, people depended heavily on daylight for major activity. But firelight still allowed quieter forms of work after dark. Repairing tools, checking bindings, preparing materials, tending fires, or organizing supplies could all happen during wakeful nighttime moments. The fire didn't turn night into day, but it created enough visibility for patient hands. You watch the young woman testing the cord's strength. She pulls it gently between both hands, then nods to herself and continues twisting. Her fingers move automatically now, guided by repetition learned across years. The fibers smell dry and grassy in the warmth. One of the children nearby wakes briefly and watches her. The child says nothing, just stares sleepily at the moving hands and glowing embers before drifting back down into sleep again. Learning in ancient communities likely happened this way, much of the time not through formal lessons, but through watching, copying, listening, and slowly joining the work of daily life. The old man pauses his sharpening and warms his hands above the coals. You notice the careful economy of movement in everything here. No wasted energy, no rushing. The night itself encourages slowness. Even speech remains soft and measured. A few drops of water still fall occasionally from branches after the earlier rain tap, tap, tap. The sound blends with the scraping stone and the crackling embers until the entire camp feels suspended inside one gentle rhythm. You begin to understand that wakefulness at night may once have offered something modern life rarely allows.
Quiet. Not silence exactly, but uninterrupted quiet. No schedules pressing in, no crowds, no noise beyond weather, breathing, fire, and distant animals. A waking person could think slowly during these hours. Modern people sometimes describe their best ideas arriving late at night when distractions fade. That may not be an accident. The brain behaves differently in darkness and partial wakefulness. Thoughts loosen. Memory wanders. Imagination softens around the edges. The old man suddenly chuckles under his breath. The young woman glances toward him. He lifts the stone point slightly and mutters something while shaking his head. Even without understanding the language, you can guess what happened. He has spent several careful minutes sharpening the wrong edge or discovering a flaw too late. Ancient craftsmanship probably included many moments of quiet irritation. The woman smiles sleepily and replies with what sounds suspiciously like teasing. Some things never change. Human beings have always enjoyed mild sarcasm before breakfast. You lean closer to the remaining warmth. The air beyond the fire still bites with cold, but dawn is approaching slowly now. The eastern horizon carries the faintest silver light beneath the trees. The stars overhead remain visible, though fewer than before. Across the camp, another person wakes and begins sorting through a small bundle of gathered materials, dried plant fibers, bone pieces, a stone flake wrapped carefully in hide. Every object matters here because every object requires effort. Archaeological discoveries from prehistoric camps often reveal surprising complexity in tool-making and material use. Stone blades, scrapers, needles, adhesives, pigments, cords, ornaments, and carefully shaped points show that ancient humans invested enormous skill into practical objects. Even small repairs could improve survival. The waking hours before dawn offered time for maintenance. You realize that this camp does not separate rest and usefulness as sharply as modern life often does. Today, people tend to divide existence into strict categories: work time, sleep time, productivity time, relaxation time. Ancient life seems softer around the edges. A person may wake, tend the fire, adjust bedding, repair a cord, stare into embers for a while, then return to sleep. Waketh. Illness itself is not treated as failure. The young woman finishes the cord and wraps it neatly around her wrist. Satisfied, the old man tests the edge of his tool with one careful thumb. Satisfied enough. Nearby, a younger sleeper suddenly sits upright in confusion, clearly waking from a dream before realizing where they are. They blink at the fire, the people working quietly, the faint dawn light. Then they groan softly and lie back down. Apparently, prehistoric humans also understood the universal joy of realizing it is still too early to fully wake up. A bird calls once from somewhere above the trees.
The sound feels important. Morning's coming. You smell damp soil warming very slightly beneath the changing air. Smoke drifts upward more cleanly now as the wind settles. The entire landscape seems to loosen after the long, cold night. The old man finally sets aside his work. He stretches slowly, joints cracking faintly in the quiet. Then he lies back near the fire, pulling part of a high, across his chest. The young woman remains awake a little longer, watching the growing light at the horizon. Perhaps she's thinking about the day ahead, perhaps remembering a dream, perhaps simply enjoying the strange calm that exists before the camp fully wakes. You sit beside the last glowing embers and feel how ancient this hour truly is. The useful dark, the gentle waking, the body drifting naturally between rest and awareness without shame or urgency. Somewhere deep inside your own restless nights, this older rhythm may still survive. You wake, you think. You listen to the quiet house. You adjust blankets. You remember things. Maybe you even wander toward the kitchen for water, while pretending not to become emotionally attached to leftover snacks. Then eventually sleep returns, not broken, just interrupted briefly by being human. The first true light of dawn now touches the edge of the camp. Faces become clearer, shadows soften, and slowly, beside the fading fire, the ancient Nig. HT begins giving itself back to morning. The stars become the roof above everything. By the time the fire settles into its final glowing coals, the clouds from the rain have disappeared completely. The air feels cleaner now, washed, cold and sharp. Moisture clings to the grass around camp, turning each blade silver beneath the fading moonlight. You lie back near the embers and look upward. The sky is enormous, not empty crowded. Thousands upon thousands of stars stretch across the darkness in pale rivers and scattered clusters. Some burn steadily, others flicker faintly through the shifting air. The longer you stare, the more appear, until the whole sky feels alive with distant light. Modern people rarely see this anymore. Electric cities erase most of the night sky beneath a soft orange glow. Streetlights, buildings, screens, headlights, signs, windows. Human beings have wrapped themselves in permanent brightness. But here, 50,000 years ago, darkness still belongs to the stars. And born. Because of that, humans look up again and again. The camp around you remains mostly quiet. A few people sleep deeply. Others drift in lighter rest, turning occasionally beneath damp hides drying beside the fire. One child snores softly with astonishing commitment for someone so small. The old woman from earlier opens her eyes briefly and gazes upward too, not casually.
Familiarity does not erase wonder. For ancient people, the sky offered more than beauty. It carried direction, timing, memory, and perhaps meaning. Before maps, compasses, and written calendars, the heavens moved in patterns humans could observe year after year. Certain stars appeared during colder seasons, others vanished for months before returning again. Over long stretches of time, careful observation could help groups anticipate migration patterns, seasonal weather, and changes in available food. You notice one of the younger adults tracing a shape slowly through the sky with a finger, perhaps a remembered path. Rhapsody, perhaps simply habit.
No written constellation names exist here yet, but the human urge to connect stars into patterns may already be ancient. Across later civilizations separated by enormous distances, people repeatedly turned stars into hunters, animals, spirits, heroes, rivers, and gods. The sky became a canvas for memory. You breathe in the cold night air. It smells of damp earth, smoke, cooling ash, and wet bark. Somewhere beyond camp, water drips steadily from leaves left heavy by rain. The sounds are small enough that the silence between them feels almost physical. A younger child wakes and sits upright, suddenly blinking toward the sky. For a moment, the child simply stares, then points upward excitedly at a bright streak crossing the darkness. A meteor, gone almost instantly. Several nearby adults glance upward, too. Even now, sudden lights in the sky still capture human attention immediately. Imagine how startling they must have seemed in a world where every nation, Ural event carried mystery. The child whispers rapidly to the nearest adult, who responds with what sounds like sleepy amusement. The child continues pointing long after the streak has vanished. Children probably asked endless questions beneath ancient skies. What is that star? Why does the moon change shape? Where does the sun go? Why does lightning strike? Why does winter come? Honestly, humanity may have invented storytelling, largely because adults became exhausted trying to explain things to curious children at midnight. The child eventually curls back down beneath a covering, still peeking upward occasionally through half-closed eyes. The stars remain. You notice how naturally the sky encourages slower thinking. Without distractions pulling attention in 20 directions, the mind settles into longer observations. Ancient humans likely spent far more time simply watching the natural world than most modern people ever do, not because they were magically wiser, but because the world around them demanded attention. Animal movement, weather, seasonal change, wind direction, moonlight, stars, everything mattered. Archaeological discoveries from later prehistoric periods reveal that humans eventually aligned monuments, structures, and ceremonial places with solar or lunar events. Some stone arrangements and early constructions suggest careful sky observation long before written astronomy emerged. Exactly when humans first began intentionally tracking celestial patterns remains uncertain, but curiosity about the heavens appears very old indeed. Beside you, the embers collapse, softly inward. A pulse of warmth brushes your face. The stars overhead seem brighter now that the moon has lowered toward the horizon. One cluster hangs directly above the trees like scattered frost. You suddenly understand why ancient travelers may have relied on the night sky so deeply. In open landscapes, stars offer stability. Rivers change, forests burn, trails vanish under snow, but the sky returns in recognizable patterns. One of the men near the outer edge of camp wakes briefly and studies the horizon before closing his eyes again. Perhaps he's checking how much night remains. Perhaps he recognizes certain stars as markers of approaching dawn. Time here is not mechanical. It is observed, felt, remembered. The fire gives a final crackle as another small branch shifts. You pull your covering tighter against the cold. Moisture from the rain has left the air heavy and biting. Yet the camp feels peaceful beneath the vast sky. No walls, no ceilings, only stars overhead, and sleeping people gathered close against the darkness. You think about how often modern insomnia traps people indoors beneath artificial light. You wake and stare at ceilings, numbers, glowing clocks. The mind turns inward too sharply. But ancient waking carried the possibility of looking outward instead, toward weather, toward firelight, toward breathing companions, toward stars. Perhaps that changed the feel.
Eyeing of wakefulness itself. The old woman nearest the fire quietly murmurs something while half asleep.
Another adult responds without opening their eyes. The exchange fades immediately back into silence. Above them, the stars continue their slow movement across the sky, exactly as they did for countless generations before cities existed. You remain there watching until your own eyes grow heavy again. The night feels enormous now, but not lonely. The camp rests beneath the oldest ceiling humanity has ever known, and somewhere deep inside your own restless mind, those same stars may still linger quietly, reminding the body that darkness was once a place humans shared together beneath open skies. Winter changes the shape of sleep. You feel it before dawn fully arrives. The cold presses deeper into the camp, settling into the ground beneath the bedding and creeping through seams in the shelters. Even the fire struggles against it. The coals still glow, but their warmth reaches only a short distance before the freezing air swallows it whole. People pull closer together instinctively. A child curls tightly against an older woman's side. Two younger adults sleep back to back beneath the same heavy hide. Someone stretches a foot toward the embers without opening their eyes, chasing warmth through sleep itself. The long winter night still holds the world. You glance toward the eastern horizon, but the first light arrives slowly this season. During colder months in Ice Age regions, darkness could stretch across many hours, shaping not only movement and hunting but also rest. Human beings living close to natural light likely experienced winter very differently from modern people sealed inside electrically lit homes. Long nights may have encouraged longer periods of sleep, quieter activity, or segmented sleep broken by wakeful intervals beside the fire. You sit quietly, listening to the camp breathe. The air smells sharp and mineral beneath the fading smoke. Damp hides drying. From the rain now release a heavy animal scent as warmth slowly reaches them. Frost clings thickly to nearby grass, turning the ground pale silver beneath the stars. One of the younger men wakes and immediately tucks both hands beneath his arms for warmth. A deeply ancient maneuver. Even now, millions of people perform this exact movement every winter morning while refusing to leave blankets for at least 5 additional minutes. The man stares into the darkness for a while before sitting up. He adds another carefully chosen branch to the fire. The wood catches slowly, flames licking upward in soft orange ribbons. Nearby, sleepers shift slightly as the warmth spreads again. Winter demanded preparation in prehistoric life. People needed fuel, shelter materials, preserved food, reliable clothing, and detailed knowledge of seasonal landscapes. In colder regions, survival depended heavily on cooperation and planning. Groups likely adjusted movement patterns according to weather, animal migration, ration, and available resources. The younger man rubs his hands near the flames and exhales slowly. You notice how naturally everyone here accepts waking during the long night. Nobody appears confused by it. The darkness lasts too long to expect one perfect, uninterrupted stretch of sleep. Instead, the camp drifts through cycles of sleeping, waking, warming, listening, and resting again. The rhythm feels almost tidal. One sleeper rises while another sinks deeper into dreams. One watches the fire while another wakes briefly to adjust bedding. The group never becomes fully unconscious at once. The winter air itself encourages movement. Stay still too long and cold begins creeping into fingers, toes, shoulders, hips. Ancient sleeping places were warm by necessity rather than luxury. Grass bedding, hides, body heat, and fire helped enormously. But winter nights still carried discomfort modern bedrooms rarely approach. You shift closer to the flames. The warmth touches your face immediately, while your back remains chilled. Smoke curls upward, carrying the rich smell of burning resin. Somewhere nearby, ice cracks softly along the edge of a shallow puddle left by the rain. A woman near the outer edge of camp suddenly sneezes. Several nearby sleepers stir in annoyance without fully waking. Human patience, before sunrise, appears to have always had limits. The woman mutters something apologetic under her breath and pulls her covering tighter around herself. One of the elders beside her quietly hands over an extra scrap of hide without opening their eyes. These small acts of shared comfort happen constantly in the camp. No speeches, no ceremonies, just practical care woven into the night. During long winters, humans likely spent more time gathered closely around fires. Archaeological remains from colder prehistoric environments often show repeated hearth use, dense living areas, and evidence of sustained occupation in sheltered locations. Firewood itself became precious, a goo. Campsite with protection from wind and access to resources could matter enormously. The younger man near the fire glances upward. The stars remain bright, though dawn inches slowly closer. You wonder how winter darkness shaped the human mind. Long nights create space for stories, memory, reflection, and wakefulness. Without modern entertainment, people may have filled those hours with conversation, repair work, observation, dreaming, and periods of quiet rest between sleeps. Perhaps winter taught humans patience. There's little else to do when darkness lasts so long. A child nearby wakes briefly and immediately complains softly about the cold. The older woman beside them responds by dragging the child directly against her side beneath the hide covering. Problem solved through the timeless technology of warmth. The child sighs happily and falls asleep again within seconds. You hear gentle snoring rise from the far side of camp. Another sleeper scratches absent-mindedly at their hair. Before rolling over, the fire cracks loudly as trapped moisture bursts inside a branch. Everything feels slower during winter nights. Movement slows, speech slows, thoughts slow. Even the stars seem to move more patiently overhead. Modern people often try to resist seasonal changes entirely. Bright lights extend evenings. Heating systems erase cold. Schedules remain fixed regardless of sunrise or weather. Yet the body still responds to shorter days and longer darkness. Many people feel sleepier during winter months without fully understanding why. Ancient humans lived directly inside those seasonal rhythms. The younger man eventually lowers himself back onto the bedding near the fire. He places one arm across his face to block lingering smoke and closes his eyes again. Within minutes, his breathing deepens. The camp settles once more. The cold remains outside the circle of warmth, waiting patiently beyond the firelight. But inside the camp, people sleep in shifting layers of shared heart. Tea and intermittent wakefulness, adapting naturally to the long winter dark. You sit quietly among them while frost thickens along the ground. The stars begin fading one by one. A pale blue hint touches the far horizon, and slowly you understand that ancient sleep was never only about rest. It was also about endurance, about surviving long nights together, about waking when needed, sleeping when possible, and letting the body move gently with darkness instead of fighting against it. The fire glows low beside you. Winter holds the world in silence, and beneath the endless prehistoric sky, the camp drifts onward through another long human night. Someone must tend the fire before dawn disappears completely. You realize this as the camp drifts through its final stretch of darkness. The cold has become gentler now, no longer biting quite so sharply, as a faint wash of morning blue spreads low across the horizon. Even so, the embers can't survive unattended forever, and so quietly, one person wakes. Tonight it's the older man again. He pushes himself upright slowly, careful not to disturb the sleepers nearest him. The hide covering slips from one shoulder, releasing a cloud of trapped warmth into the freezing air. For a moment he simply sits there, blinking at the fire, gathering himself between sleep and waking. Then the work begins. You watch him feed the embers branch by branch. Not too quickly, never carelessly. The coals respond with small bursts of orange light, while thin smoke curls upward through the pale darkness. The smell reaches you immediately. Resin, charred bark, damp wood drying in heat. Ancient fires demanded constant attention. Without matches, lighters, or convenient little stove buttons, preserving flame mattered enormously. In many prehistoric settings, allowing a fire to die completely could create serious difficulty. Starting a new fire from scratch required time, dry materials, skill, and favorable conditions, so people protected embers carefully. Sometimes ash itself helped preserve heat through the night. A hidden coal buried beneath grey powder could survive until morning, waiting patiently for breath and fresh fuel. The old man leans close and blows gently across the coals. Red deepens instantly beneath the ash. Tiny sparks rise. Flame returns. You feel an odd satisfaction watching it happen, the same quiet pleasure people still feel while lighting fireplaces, campfires, candles, or even birthday candles in overly dark kitchens after a power outage. Fire remains emotionally powerful because for most of human history, it stood directly between comfort and hardship. The camp begins reacting to the renewed warmth almost immediately. A younger sleeper inches closer without opening their eyes. Another stretches one leg toward the flames. A child sighs deeply in sleep as heat brushes their face. The firekeeper notices all of this. His job is not only burning wood, it's maintaining the center of the camp itself. You sit nearby, listening to the soft sounds of morning approaching. Wet branches drip occasionally after the rain. Somewhere in the distance, birds begin tentative calls one by one. The stars overhead fade slowly. though a few still shine stubbornly above the western horizon. The old man reaches for a stack of gathered wood beside him. You notice how carefully the branches have been sorted: thin, dry twigs, medium branches, larger pieces saved for longer burning. Even fuel management carries planning and memory. Someone gathered this wood yesterday while thinking about this exact hour before dawn. Human survival often depends on preparing for needs before they arrive. One overlooked detail from ancient camp life is how much invisible labor supported basic comfort. Gathering fuel, maintaining tools, preparing bedding, repairing shelters, drying hides, protecting food from moisture and animals. These daily tasks rarely become legendary stories, but they shaped survival more reliably than dramatic heroics. Honestly, history owes far more to patient, practical people than it usually admits. The old man rubs warmth into his stiff fingers. Nearby, another adult wakes and joins him beside the fire. They sit in silence together for several moments, watching the flame strengthen. No formal shift change occurs. No one says, "Good morning, fellow guardian of thermal stability." They simply share the responsibility naturally. The second adult reaches toward a damp branch, drying near the heat, and tests it carefully. Still too wet, he sets it aside again. You notice how skilled everyone here is at reading materials through touch. Wood, stone, hide, grass, bone. Their hands understand texture the way modern people understand icons on a phone screen. The fire brightens further now. Orange light spills across sleeping faces and shelter walls. Steam rises faintly from damp coverings drying near the heat. Smoke drifts upward in slow blue ribbons before disappearing into the brightening sky. One child wake. Essen crawls sleepily toward the warmth without fully opening their eyes. The adults barely react. This has happened many times before. The child curls beside the firekeeper, who automatically adjusts a hide around small shoulders while continuing to feed the flames. The movement is effortless practice through repetition. You think about how many mornings across history began exactly like this. Someone awake before dawn, someone tending warmth for others, someone quietly protecting the group while most still sleep. Not glamorous, not remembered by name, yet absolutely essential. The firekeeper glances eastward. The horizon now glows pale silver beneath the trees. Frost along the grass begins melting slowly closest to the camp's warmth. The air smells less sharp than before, carrying traces of wet soil and smoke instead of pure cold. A younger man nearby wakes suddenly and groans at the stiffness in his back. The firekeeper grins faintly without looking at him, apparently prehistoric. Aging jokes also existed. The younger man mutters something while rubbing his shoulders. Another sleeper laughs softly from beneath a covering before immediately pretending to still be asleep. Morning humor arrives early in human history. The camp begins waking in waves now. One person sits up, another yawns. Someone coughs smoke from their throat. A child complains quietly about the cold ground. The firekeeper continues feeding the flames through all of it, calm and patient at the center of the growing movement. Researchers studying ancient hearth sites sometimes uncover layers of ash, charcoal, cracked stone, and burned bone that reveal repeated, long-term fire use. Some hearths were maintained in the same places again and again across seasons or generations. The fire itself became part of the memory of a place. You can understand why even now people gather instinctively around warmth, around light, around kitchens and fireplaces and glowing campfires beneath night skies. The body remembers. The firekeeper finally leans back slightly, satisfied that the flames are stable again. Heat spreads comfortably through the camp now. The younger adults wake more fully. Children stretch beneath hides. One woman begins sorting through supplies beside her bedding while still half asleep. The long night is ending, but the fire carried everyone through it. You sit quietly beside the glowing hearth and realize how much human sleep once depended on these careful nighttime rituals. Waking was not meaningless interruption. Sometimes it had purpose. Feed the fire, check the weather, warm the children, listen to the dark, rest again. The flames rise steadily now beneath the brightening sky, and a smoke drifts upward into the fading stars. The camp slowly prepares to hand itself from night into morning once more. By morning, the camp no longer feels temporary, even though everything here can be moved, folded, carried, repaired, abandoned, or rebuilt somewhere else. The place has got a hat. Heard meaning during the night. The fire has marked the center. The shelters have made a boundary. The sleeping bodies have warmed the ground. Footprints cross one another in the damp earth like quiet handwriting. You stand near the edge of the camp as dawn spreads slowly through the trees. Mist hangs low over the grass. The rain from earlier has left beads of water along branches, and each drop catches the pale light before falling. Smoke rises from the hearth in a thin blue column. The smell is soft now, less sharp than midnight smoke, mixed with wet leaves, cold soil, and the faint animal warmth of hides. This is not yet a village. There are no permanent houses, no fields, no streets, no fences, no storage buildings, no little signs telling people not to park carts in inconvenient places. The people around you live in a mobile world. They move according to animals, seasons, plants, water, weather, and memory. Still, the camp has its own order.
A place for fire, a place for sleeping.
A place for tools, a place where children are kept near warmth, a place where food scraps are not left too close to bedding because ancient people were practical, and probably did not enjoy inviting every curious night creature to breakfast. You watch as the group begins waking in layers. One woman rises first and shakes moisture from a hide. Another checks a bundle of tools. A child sits upright, hair wild from sleep, looking deeply offended by the existence of morning. An older man warms his hands by the strengthened fire and says something that makes one of the younger adults smile. The camp is alive, now not noisy, but full of small human motions. For much of prehistory, people lived in small bands rather than large settlements. Group size changed with season and circumstance, but daily survival depended on cooperation among people who knew one another closely. They shared food, watched children, cared for injuries, made tools, remembered paths, and slept near one another. Because longing was not abstract. It was physical. It was practical. It was warmth beside the fire. You walk slowly through the edge of the sleeping area. The ground is pressed flat where bodies rested. Plant bedding has been pushed aside in places. A smooth stone sits beside a hide bundle, perhaps used as a weight. A few flakes of worked stone glint near the hearth, sharp enough to cut skin if stepped on carelessly. Someone notices them and brushes them into a safer pile with a stick. Even ancient camps had housekeeping. Not the scented candle, matching basket, minimalist shelf kind, of course. More the, please do not slice your foot open before breakfast kind. You pause beside a young woman who's tying a bundle together. Her hands move quickly now that daylight has returned. She wraps tools, cord, and scraps of hide into a package that can be carried. Nothing is left casually behind, unless it is truly useless or too heavy to move. Mobility teaches discipline. This is one of the great differences between the world you know and the world you're visiting. Modern people build life around storage. Closets, cupboards, attics, garages, cloud drives, junk drawers that seem to reproduce at night. Ancient mobile groups could not carry everything. Objects had to earn their place. A tool mattered because someone made it, used it, and would need it again. Nearby, a child tries to help by picking up a small branch and placing it proudly in the wrong pile. An adult corrects them gently. The child moves it, then looks around for approval. Learning happens constantly here, folded into ordinary work. The camp, before villages, is not disorganized. It is simply flexible. It can become home for a night, several days, a season or longer, depending on resources and weather. Archaeological traces of such places can be fainter hearth, stone tools, bones, charcoal, disturbed soil. Sometimes only fragments remain, and from those fragments, researchers try to imagine the movements of living people. The difficulty is humbling. A campsite that once held voices, jokes, dreams, hunger, and waking children may survive only as a scatter of stones and darkened earth. You look back toward the fire and understand why the night mattered so much. It created the group again. Each evening people gathered close. Each night they slept in shared awareness. Each morning they woke into relationship. The village before villages was made from repeated closeness, not walls, not roads, not buildings, bodies near fire, voices in darkness, hands passing food, eyes opening when a child stirred. Someone kneels near the hearth and separates usable coals from ash. Another person scrapes mud from a hide. A younger man checks the point he sharpened before dawn, turning it proudly in the light, though the old woman nearby gives him a look, suggesting it's not quite as impressive as he thinks. Human review processes are also ancient, apparently. The sun has not fully risen yet, but the eastern sky has brightened, into pale gold. Birds begin calling more confidently now. Their sounds fill the spaces where night insects have faded. The camp responds to daylight by expanding outward. People stand, stretch, walk farther from the fire, look toward the surrounding land. During the night, everyone was drawn inward. Now, morning lets them spread. You notice how different waking feels here from waking in a modern room. There's no alarm tearing through dreams, no immediate list glowing on a screen, no calendar packed with obligations. Yet there is work waiting, and it is serious work. Food must be found, materials gathered, children watched, weather judged, paths chosen. The difference is that the day grows from the landscape rather than from a schedule. You breathe in slowly. Cold air fills your lungs. Smoke lingers in your hair and clothing. Your hands smell faintly of ash. The ground is damp beneath your feet, but light is warming the upper branches of the trees now. The world feels newly made, though. Everyone here knows it's only another morning. Still, another morning is no small thing. The camp survived the night. The fire remained alive. The children slept. The elders woke. The rain passed. The animals stayed beyond the edge of light. And now the village, before villages, begins to loosen itself from darkness. You stand among these early humans as they prepare for movement. And you understand that their sleep was never separate from their society. It belonged to the group. It depended on closeness, knowledge, trust, warmth, and care. Long before permanent homes, humans made temporary homes again and again. And each night beside firelight, they became a little village under the stars. You return slowly from the ancient camp into the feeling of your own midnight room. Not all at once. The fire remains in your mind for a while, the damp grass, the cold air, the old woman adjusting a child's covering, the firekeeper blowing gently across hidden coals, the stars above the camp like frost scattered across black stone. Then little by little the modern world comes back. A mattress beneath you, a wall nearby, a ceiling instead of open sky, maybe a window with curtains, a quiet street outside, a phone resting somewhere too close, doing its best impression of a sleeping object, while secretly holding the entire internet, and perhaps you wake, your eyes open in darkness. For a few seconds you don't know the time. You only know that night is still present, the room is quiet. Your body is awake, while the world seems asleep. This is the moment many modern people begin to panic. Why am I awake? How long have I been awake? How much sleep am I losing? Will tomorrow be ruined? Should I check the clock? And then, because modern humanity is extremely talented at making things worse, you check the clock. Now, the night has a number 2.43, a very judgmental number. But after walking beside those ancient fires, you can hold this moment differently. You remember that waking during the night doesn't automatically mean something has gone wrong. The human body is not a machine built to power down perfectly for 8 uninterrupted hours. Sleep has stages. It rises and falls. It can be touched by temperature, dreams, hunger, noise, stress, light, and memory. Brief awakenings are common even when people don't remember them by morning. The idea that healthy sleep must be one flawless block is fairly recent in the long story of humanity. Before electric light, before strict work schedules, before clocks organized every hour, many societies lived with more flexible nights. In some historical periods, people described first sleep and second sleep. In many communities, people woke, prayed, talked, tended fires, cared for children, checked animals, or simply rested quietly before sleeping again. Not every place or era followed the same pattern, of course. Human sleep has always adapted to environment, culture, season, safety, and work. But the larger lesson remains gentle and useful. Waking is not always failure. You lie still and imagine the ancient camp again. When someone woke there, they listened. They checked the fire. They sensed the air. They noticed whether a child was cold. Their waking had room to exist. It did not immediately become a problem to solve. You can borrow that softness. Instead of fighting the moment you notice it, the room is cool. The blanket touches your skin. Your breathing moves steadily in and out. Somewhere in the house, a pipe settles, or a distant car passes, or the faint hum of modern life continues behind walls. These sounds are not cave lions. They're just the little animals of your century. You don't need to wrestle sleep back by force. Sleep dislikes being chased. It's very rude that way. The harder you command yourself to sleep, the more awake the mind becomes, like a cat that only sits on your lap when you stop inviting it. Ancient wakefulness had patience. You can let the body remember patience too. You breathe lowly.
You feel the weight of your body. You let your eyes rest, even if sleep hasn't returned yet.
In the ancient camp, someone awake in the night might have used the time softly listening to rain, watching embers, thinking through tomorrow's path, remembering a dream, sharing a few quiet words. The waking was not filled with bright screens or urgent self-criticism. It was held inside darkness. That may be one reason modern midnight waking feels sharper. The body rises into awareness, but the modern mind immediately floods the moment with judgment. Light from a screen tells the brain, morning has arrived. A clock turns wakefulness into arithmetic. Thoughts become tasks. Tasks become worry. Worry becomes more wakefulness. And there you are, alert as a prehistoric lookout, except the only predator nearby is tomorrow's calendar. You can smile at that gently. No need to be harsh with yourself. The body's old. It carries habits shaped long before bedrooms existed. It checks the world's sum. E-teams. It asks whether you're safe. It notices discomfort, sound, temperature, memory, and emotion. The ancient sleeper woke to cold air and animal calls. You may wake to stress, digestion, light through blinds, or a mind still busy from the day. Different worlds, same human nervous system doing its best with the materials available. You imagine placing another branch on the fire, not literally, unless your bedroom situation is very unusual and possibly illegal, but inwardly, you feed the embers of calm, a slower breath, a softer thought, a loosening of the jaw, a hand resting against the blanket. You allow the waking to be small, not a crisis, not a forecast, not a verdict, just a pause inside the night. There is comfort in knowing that countless people before you have opened their eyes in darkness. Early humans beneath stars, farmers in cold huts, medieval households between first and second sleep, sailors on watch, parents beside restless children, elders listening to wind, workers befriend. Or dawn people everywhere across eras, lying quietly in the middle hours and waiting for sleep to return. You are not alone in this. You are part of an old human rhythm. Outside your room, night continues its own slow work. The moon may be above the rooftops, clouds may be passing. Somewhere someone else is awake too, perhaps in another country, another time zone, another small pool of darkness, wondering why their eyes have opened. The ancient camp teaches that the answer may sometimes be simple. Because humans wake, because bodies listen, because sleep moves in waves, because darkness was once shared, and some part of you still remembers the shore. So you don't panic, you rest. You let the room become your quiet camp. The blanket becomes your hide covering. The faint warmth beneath it becomes your fire. Your breath becomes the soft breathing of the group around you. And slowly, without forcing it, the night grows gentle again. Now, imagine the night without walls. Not just one night, two househands of nights. Generation after generation, sleeping beneath weather, animal sounds, changing seasons, and the enormous turning sky. Even when humans later built shelters, huts, longhouses, stone rooms, and eventually cities, the body still carried memories shaped outdoors for far longer than indoors. You feel that inheritance now as dawn continues spreading slowly across the ancient camp. The fire burns brighter than before, fed carefully through the final dark hours. Smoke drifts upward in pale threads. The smell of warming earth rises from the ground where frost has begun melting beneath the first touch of sunlight. Most of the group is awake now. A few children remain wrapped tightly in sleep, while adults move quietly around them. Someone checks a bundle of food. Someone else shakes rainwater from a hide covering. The older woman from earlier crouches near the edge of camp, examining the damp ground, perhaps studying tracks left during the night. Human beings once slept inside. The living world itself. That changes a nervous system. Modern homes protect you from almost everything. Temperature remains controlled. Doors lock. Artificial light pushes back darkness. Weather becomes something observed through windows rather than felt directly against skin. These protections are extraordinary achievements, but the body beneath them is still ancient. It still notices sounds. It still reacts to darkness. It still wakes sometimes to check the world. The young man who sharpened his tool before dawn walks beyond the edge of camp, carrying a spear and a small bundle. Another follows him. Their breath clouds in the cold air, while wet grass bends beneath their feet. Morning work begins early. Across many ancient societies, daylight mattered too much to waste. Hunting, gathering, tracking, preparing food, repairing shelters, carrying water, and moving camp all depended on available light. Without electricity, sunrise naturally pulled people toward activity. And because HTs remained darker, quieter, and longer than modern nights, sleep itself may have stretched differently across time. You notice the children waking gradually now. One emerges from beneath a hide, looking deeply suspicious of the cold morning air. Another immediately wanders toward the fire in search of warmth before fully opening their eyes. A third child discovers mud left behind by the rain and becomes fascinated by it within seconds. Human curiosity also survives every era unchanged. The old woman notices and gently redirects the child before the entire camp becomes decorated in prehistoric swamp paste. You walk slowly beyond the shelters while the camp stirs behind you. The landscape glows pale gold beneath the growing sunrise. Mist hangs low between trees. Water droplets tremble along branches before falling into moss and dark soil. The world feels enormous out here. And ancient humans lived inside that feeling constantly. They did not separate themselves cleanly from nature. Because ABS, they could not. Weather entered sleep. Season shaped movement. Animal migrations affected food. Moonlight changed visibility. Rain altered comfort. Wind direction mattered. Cold mattered. Fire mattered. The human nervous system evolved in conversation with the environment. That conversation still continues beneath modern life, even if the signals arrive differently. Now, some sleep researchers believe modern artificial lighting has dramatically changed human sleep timing over the last few centuries. Before widespread electricity, many people likely spent more time in darkness each night, especially during winter. Candlelight and firelight are dim compared to electric bulbs and screens. The body responds differently to soft amber light than to bright blue-white light flooding directly into tired eyes at midnight. You think about that while watching the sunrise slowly brighten the camp. The ancient sleepers did not scroll through glowing rectangles before bed. They didn't answer me. Senses at midnight or fall asleep beside endless streams of information. Their minds carried stress, certainly, but it was shaped by weather, hunger, movement, danger, and relationships rather than constant stimulation. Different pressures, different noise. The young hunters disappear into the trees. The camp behind you grows louder now, with soft morning conversation. Children fully awake, tools shifting, branches snapping beneath feet. Someone laughs. Someone coughs smoke from their lungs after leaning too close to the fire. The ordinary sounds of human life beginning again. You kneel near the damp ground and touch the soil. Cold, soft, real. You understand why waking at night may once have felt less strange. The boundaries between body and environment were thinner. Sleep was never total escape from the world. It remained connected to sound, temperature, light, movement, weather, and other people. Even now, studies of sleeping brains show that humans continue monitoring surroundings. During sleep, to some degree. Certain sounds wake you faster than others. A parent may sleep through thunder, yet wake instantly at a child's cry. The brain filters, watches, listens. Ancient sleep probably required even more awareness. You rise and look back toward the camp. Smoke curls upward into the brightening air. Children huddle near warmth. The old man sits repairing something small near the fire, while younger adults prepare for the day ahead. Everything feels calm, not because life is easy here, but because life is shared here. The body does not need to stand guard alone. Perhaps that's part of what modern sleeplessness sometimes lacks. Many people now sleep isolated from extended family, neighbors, shared rhythms, and collective nighttime awareness. The ancient camp distributed wakefulness across the group. One person listened while another rested. One rose to tend the fire while another dreamed. Today, many people carry the entire burden of alertness alone. No wonder the nervous system grows tired. A child suddenly runs past you, laughing breathlessly, before slipping in wet grass and falling directly into mud. There is a long silence. Then the entire nearby camp erupts in sleepy amusement. The child sits there, air stunned for a moment, covered in damp earth and personal betrayal. Some historical experiences truly are universal. The old woman walks over, calmly lifts the child upright, brushes mud from their arms, and leads them back toward the fire. Warmth, comfort, laughter, mourning. The camp continues, and as sunlight finally reaches the upper branches of the trees, you realize the ancient human body was never designed only for perfect sleep. It was designed for adaptable sleep that could bend around danger, weather, children, hunger, noise, cold, responsibility, and changing light. Sleep that could wake briefly, listen carefully, and return gently to rest. The fire crackles behind you. Birdsong fills the damp morning air. The night has passed once more through human hands. And somewhere deep beneath your own modern habits, the old outdoor sleeper still opens one eye in darkness, checks the world, and quietly waits for dawn. The path carries you forward through time, not suddenly, naturally. Not like a door opening with a dramatic creak, but gently, as if the morning mist itself becomes years. The ancient camp behind you grows faint. The fire, the hides, the damp grass, the waking children all soften into memory. The trees thin. The land changes. The air warms. The old mobile world begins slowly and unevenly to give way to something new. You arrive many thousands of years later. Not in a city yet, not in a kingdom, but in a small early farming settlement where night has learned different sounds. The first thing you notice is the smell. Smoke still rises from hearths familiar and comforting. But now it mixes with stored grain, trampled earth, animal dung, drying reeds, clay, and the warm breath of enclosed livestock. The scent is heavier than the open camp, more settled, more crowded, more human in the way a place becomes human, when people return to it again and again until even the ground seems to remember their footsteps. Low houses stand close together, made from mud brick. Clay, timber, reeds, or packed earth, depending on the region. Roofs are flat in some places, sloped in others. Walls hold warmth better than a temporary windbreak, but they also hold smells, smoke, insects, and the small daily complications of living beside everyone and everything you own. Welcome to the Neolithic nighter, lovely era if you enjoy grain storage, animal noise, and the thrilling possibility of stepping barefoot into something unpleasant before dawn. Here, people still wake in darkness. But the reasons have changed. The world of farming brings new security and new worries at the same time. Crops must be protected. Grain must be kept dry. Animals must be watched. Stored food attracts rodents. Settled life draws people closer together, which brings cooperation but also noise, illness, disputes, and the kind of neighborly irritation that probably began the moment two houses stood within hearing distance. You walk between the dwellings as twilight settles over the settlement. A.W. Oman carries a clay vessel toward a doorway. A child follows her, holding a small bundle of straw. Somewhere nearby, goats or sheep shuffle inside an enclosure, their hooves tapping softly against packed earth. A dog lifts its head and watches you with calm suspicion, which is fair. Dogs have always taken their jobs seriously. The hearth inside one house glows low. You step closer and see a family preparing for sleep. Mats made from reeds or woven plant fibers lie along the floor. Clay vessels sit near the wall. A grinding stone rests nearby, its surface worn smooth from countless hours turning grain into meal. The air is warm, smoky, and close. Farming changed human sleep because farming changed human time. Days became tied to planting, harvesting, tending animals, repairing storage, grinding grain, and maintaining houses. People no longer moved only with wild herds and seasonal gathering routes. Many stayed in one place for longer periods, sometimes year-round. That settled life created new rhythms. Dawn mattered for fields. Night mattered for animals and stored food. You hear movement outside. A man rises from his bedding before fully sleeping and steps into the dark yard. He listens near the animal pen. Something has stirred there. Not a predator, perhaps just restless goats pressing against one another, but he checks anyway. Losing an animal could matter. A damaged fence could matter. A thief, a wolf, a fox, or simple bad luck could matter. The old prehistoric camp woke to the sounds of wild darkness. This settlement wakes to the sounds of possession. Mine, ours, stored, guarded, counted. That shift is enormous. In hunter-gatherer life, wealth often had to be portable. In farming villages, wealth could sit in jars, pens, baskets, fields, and houses. With storage came planning, but also anxiety. Food kept for later must be defended from moisture, animals, insects, and other humans. A person might wake not only because the body was cold or the fire low, but because grain had to remain safe until morning. Inside the house, a child turns in sleep on a reed mat. The mat rustles softly. The mother adjusts a woven covering over the child and glances toward the door, where the man has disappeared into the yard. Firelight flickers across the clay wall, revealing hand marks left from construction. The house itself carries touch. A small object rests near the hearth, perhaps a shaped stone bead or charm. Early settled communities often produced ornaments, figurines, decorated vessels, and ritual objects whose meanings are not always clear. Some may have been protective, some social, some spiritual, some simply beautiful. People do not stop loving beauty just because they have chores. Outside, the night deepens. Animals breathe in their enclosure. One goat gives a soft, complaining bleat, apparently dissatisfied with conditions, management, or the general concept of night. The man mutters something at it. The goat remains unconvinced. You follow him as he checks the fence. His hand moves along posts and woven branches. The wood is damp from evening air. He presses one section back into place and listens beyond the settlement boundary. The surrounding land is darker than the village, but not empty. Fields lie nearby, shaped by human labor. Beyond them are wild edges where animals still move. This is the strange border of the Neolithic world, not fully wild, not fully controlled. People are beginning to reshape landscapes, but the night still belongs partly to everything outside human plans. The man returns indoors and lowers himself beside the hearth. His family is nearly asleep again. He doesn't seem surprised to have woken and checked the animals. It's simply part of life, now a new version of nighttime vigilance. The older rhythms remain beneath the new ones. Fire still matters. Warmth still matters. Children still wake. Dreams still come. But settled life adds layers. Grain, pens, walls, neighbors, property, disease from close living. New work for women, men, children, and elders. New reasons to rise before sunrise. You sit near the doorway and listen as the settlement quiets. One house coughs, another whispers. An animal paws the ground. A baby cries briefly, then settles. Somewhere a ceramic pot knocks softly against another as someone moves in the dark. Archaeologists often find that early farming brought both benefits and burdens. More reliable food in some settings, but also heavier labor, narrower diets in certain communities, and closer contact with animals. The night absorbed all of this. The bodies slept beside stored harvests and domesticated creatures, inside walls that protected and confined at the same time. You breathe in the warm, smoky air. It feels less open than the ancient camp, more secure, perhaps more crowded too. The people here have gained something important, but they have not escaped the ancient night. They have only changed their relationship with it. The fire lowers, the goats settle, then. Eman's breathing deepens. Outside, moonlight rests on fields that will need tending at dawn. And inside the clay-walled house, surrounded by grain, animals, tools, children, and quiet obligations, humans sleep and wake in new ways, carrying the old body into a new kind of world. The city changes the night again. You feel it long before you see the walls. The air grows thicker first, carrying unfamiliar smells across the dark landscape. Smoke, sewage, wet stone, cooking fires, animal sweat, clay, fish, damp straw, and thousands of human bodies gathered close together. The scent arrives in layers heavier than the open camp and busier than the farming village. Then the sounds appear. Voices in the distance, a dog barking, wood striking wood, a cartwheel creaking somewhere beyond the darkness, the soft clatter of late movement. You have entered one of the world's early cities. Not modern skyscrapers and glowing windows, of course. No traffic lights, no apartment towers, no exhausted person. On microwaving noodles at midnight beneath fluorescent lighting. But this place is dense with human life in a way the old camp never was. Mud brick walls rise above narrow streets. Houses lean close together. Rooftops crowd one another beneath the moonlight. Somewhere nearby a cooking fire still burns, although most families have already settled for the night. And still, humans wake in darkness. Only now there are far more reasons. You walk through a narrow alley lit faintly by moonlight and scattered hearth glow escaping through doorways. Water from earlier rain sits in uneven puddles along the street. A cat slips silently between shadows, carrying something unpleasant in its mouth, which is, honestly, excellent news for the grain supply. Cities change sleep because cities change sound. In a small prehistoric camp, the night carried wind, fire, insects, animal breathing, and occasional voices. In a city, human activity itself becomes part of the environment. Someone wakes early for worship. K. Someone argues quietly through thin walls. Someone coughs. Someone tends an oven. Someone returns late through the street outside. Complete silence becomes rare. You pause near a doorway where faint light flickers against stone. Inside, a family sleeps together in a single room. Clay lamps burn low beside the wall, their flames small and smoky. Bedding lies close together across woven mats. Storage jars line one side of the house. A ladder leads upward toward the roof. The room feels warm and crowded. One child mutters in sleep, while another sprawls sideways across two adults with astonishing confidence. Human children remain deeply committed to occupying maximum sleeping space throughout history. An older man near the doorway suddenly wakes. He listens for a moment. Not danger. Exactly just the city. A cart rattles somewhere outside. A donkey brays in protest at life itself. Voices drift faintly through the street. The man rubs his face and settles back down again. Urban life talk. The human nervous system knew habits. The night was no longer fully dark. Lamps, fires, workshops, taverns, temples, guards, bakers and travelers extended activity beyond sunset in many early cities. Some occupations required waking before dawn. Others continued long after darkness fell. Sleep became shaped not only by nature but by social systems. You step back into the alley. The moonlight barely reaches the ground between the tightly packed buildings. Above you, only a narrow strip of sky remains visible. Compared to the prehistoric camp beneath open stars, the city feels enclosed. Protected, perhaps, but enclosed. A guard passes carrying a torch. Its light jumps wildly across the walls as he walks. Smoke trails behind him, carrying the sharp, oily smell of burning pitch. He glances toward you briefly, before continuing onward, sandals scraping softly against damp stone. Cities introduce new nighttime anxieties too. Theft, fire, crowding, disease, political unrest, drunken neighbor. Or singing with misplaced confidence, stored wealth inside houses. The larger human groups became, the more complicated nighttime life grew. You hear a baby crying from an upper room. Almost immediately, another voice answers, low and soothing. The crying softens into hiccuping breaths, then fades. Some sounds remain eternal. A parent calming a child in darkness may be one of the oldest nighttime sounds humans know. A nearby rooftop catches your attention. Several people sleep there, beneath blankets, despite the cool air. In many ancient cities, rooftops offered relief during warmer seasons when indoor rooms became smoky or stifling. The night sky still mattered even among walls and streets. You climb carefully onto the flat roof. From here the city spreads outward beneath moonlight. Hearth smoke drifts upward from scattered houses. Dogs wander narrow streets below. Somewhere farther away, music floats faintly through the darkness, perhaps from a gathering not yet finished. You realize something important. The city never fully sleeps. Not completely. Even in antiquity, human settlements contained layers of wakefulness moving through the night. Bakers rising early, guards walking streets, priests tending temple fires, travelers arriving late, mothers feeding infants, workers beginning before sunrise. The ancient urban night remained alive while much of the population rested. The sleeping people beside you shift beneath woven blankets. One man wakes briefly, glances at the sky, then closes his eyes again without concern. Perhaps he's measuring how much darkness remains before work begins. Perhaps the city noises briefly lifted him toward wakefulness before sleep reclaimed him. The body still moves in tides, even inside walls. A cool breeze passes over the rooftop, carrying river smell mixed with smoke and distant cooking fires. You pull your covering tighter around yourself and stare upward. The stars are fewer here, still beautiful, but fewer. Smoke and torchlight BL are parts of the sky. Buildings cut away the horizon. The city pulls human attention downward towards streets, trade, labor, neighbors, politics, and survival within crowded systems. And yet, the ancient sleeper remains inside these people too. They still wake when sounds change. They still seek warmth. They still sleep close to family. They still drift between deep rest and brief awareness through the night. A woman sleeping nearby suddenly reaches out in sleep and places her hand against the shoulder of the child beside her. No thought, no waking, just contact. The gesture feels older than the city around her. You hear footsteps again below, then laughter, then silence returning slowly through the streets. The rooftop sleepers breathe steadily beneath blankets dampened slightly by night air. Somewhere in the city, a temple bell sounds once, low and distant. Somewhere else, another fire is fed before dawn. The urban night stretches onward around you, crowded, restless, human, and beneath. All its walls and noise, the same ancient body still opens its eyes sometimes in darkness, listens for a moment, then slowly drifts back towards sleep beside the sounds of other people nearby. The monastery night is quieter than the city. Not silent, never silent, but quieter in a deliberate way, as though the people living here have agreed to soften themselves after dark. You arrive centuries later inside thick stone walls where candlelight flickers along narrow corridors and cold air slips beneath wooden doors. Outside, wind moves through trees beyond the monastery grounds. Somewhere farther away lies a sleeping medieval town scattered beneath moonlight and smoke. But here, inside the monastery, the night follows ritual, and ritual changes sleep. You walk slowly through a stone hallway lit by a single oil lamp. The flame trembles each time wind presses faintly through unseen cracks in the building. The walls smell of damp stone, old wood, smoking wool robes, and melted wax. A bell sound. S in the distance, low, measured. You feel it through the floor before the sound fully fades. Several doors open quietly. The monks are waking not because something is wrong, but because the night itself has been divided. In medieval Europe, many monastic communities followed structured prayer schedules that interrupted sleep during the dark hours. Night offices, vigils, or matins called monks from bed before dawn to gather in prayer and chant. Sleep became organized around spiritual time as much as natural time. You follow the figures, moving silently through the corridor. Wool robes brush softly against stone. Sandals scrape faintly along the floor. Some faces still carry sleep heavily. One younger monk nearly walks into a doorway while blinking himself awake, proving that spiritual discipline does not fully eliminate the human relationship with exhaustion. The chapel glows with candlelight. Rows of small flames reflect against polished metal and dark wood. Breath rises visibly in the cold air as the monks take their places. Outside, the world remains black except for faint moonlight beyond narrow windows. Then the chanting begins. Slow, deep, steady as breathing. The sound fills the stone chamber and settles into your chest. You understand immediately why nighttime rituals affect the body differently. The darkness sharpens attention. Candlelight softens the edges of the room. The repetition of voices creates calm through rhythm itself. Human beings have long used repetition to shape consciousness. Prayer, song, storytelling, drumming, breathing, chanting. Long before neuroscience described the nervous system, people already knew certain rhythms could quiet the mind. The chanting continues. Some monks close their eyes while singing. Others stare toward candle flames. One older monk sways slightly with fatigue, but never loses his place. Sleep inside monasteries was often practical rather than luxurious. Many medieval monastic dormitories held rows of simple beds, sleeping spaces shared communally. Blankets could be rough. Winters could be bitterly cold. Candles and fires were expensive resources. Yet these nighttime awakenings were not considered interruptions in the modern sense. They were expected parts of life. You notice something familiar beneath all the ritual. The old segmented night remain sleep, wakefulness, quiet activity, return toward rest. Only now, the quiet conversations of the prehistoric camp have become candlelit prayer inside stone walls. The human pattern survives beneath the changing world. A young monk coughs softly into his sleeve. Another suppresses a yawn with visible struggle. Honestly, medieval spirituality required impressive commitment, because waking voluntarily in freezing darkness to chant Latin before sunrise is not the path most sleepy people would naturally choose. The chanting finally softens. Silence returns slowly to the chapel. Outside, wind brushes against the building with a long, low sound. Rain Threya tends again somewhere beyond the hills. The candles flicker as air shifts through the room. The monks kneel briefly, then rise. Some will return to sleep afterward. Others may remain awake preparing manuscripts, tending fires, or beginning early duties. Medieval nights were rarely uniform across all classes and professions. Bakers rose early, guards stayed awake late. Nobles, peasants, travelers, mothers, priests, and laborers all moved through darkness differently, depending on work, season, wealth, and custom. You step quietly from the chapel into the corridor again. One monk pauses beside a narrow window. Moonlight falls across his face while he looks out over the sleeping countryside. For a moment, he simply stands there, breathing the cold air. You wonder whether he enjoys these middle hours. Perhaps the stillness feels sacred, perhaps exhausting, perhaps both. The body remains ancient even inside monasteries. People still dream, still grow cold, still wake briefly before bells, still. I struggle to stay awake during long prayers after midnight. The human nervous system does not vanish simply because walls become stone and nights become disciplined. In one small chamber, a monk sits beside a candle, copying text carefully onto parchment. Ink, feather quill, scraping sounds. The room smells strongly of wax and old paper. He blinks often from fatigue, rubbing one eye before continuing his careful work. Written knowledge survived partly because countless tired people stayed awake beside dim lights, trying not to make mistakes. You glance at the manuscript. Lines of text march steadily across the page. Outside the room, darkness still covers the monastery grounds. Before widespread mechanical clocks, nighttime schedules often followed bells, candles, stars, or habit, rather than exact hours. A candle burning down could measure passing time roughly. Church bells divided communal life. The body itself still relied heavily on sunrise and darkness. You continue walking through. GH, the sleeping monastery. Some doors remain closed and silent. From others come faint sounds. Snoring, turning bedding, quiet prayer, a whispered conversation, someone waking briefly to feed a small fire against the cold. Even in disciplined religious life, the night remains full of human interruptions. You step outside into the monastery courtyard. The stone beneath your feet holds the night chill. Clouds move slowly across the moon. Somewhere beyond the walls, an owl calls once through the darkness. The air smells clean after the crowded city. Smoke from the monastery chimney drifts upward in pale ribbons. You stand there thinking about all the ways humans have reshaped the night across history, from open prehistoric camps to farming villages, from crowded cities to stone monasteries. Yet certain things remain unchanged. People still wake in darkness. People still seek comfort. People still gather around small lights. People still divide the night into periods of sleeping and brief awareness. The monastery bell sounds once more behind you, low, calm, ancient in its own way. And somewhere beneath the robes, candles, prayers, and stone walls, the same old human body still listens through the night, waiting patiently for morning light to return. Then comes the age of clocksnot, all at once. At first, they appear as distant bells marking prayer or labor. Then towers rise over towns. Mechanical gears begin measuring hours with increasing precision. Time, which once moved mostly through sunrise, darkness, hunger, weather, and seasons, slowly becomes something counted. And once time is counted, sleep changes again. You arrive in a narrow European town sometime after midnight. The streets are dark, except for scattered lantern light glowing through windows and doorways. Rainwater glistens along uneven stone roads. Wooden houses lean close together above the street, their upper stories almost touching overhead. The town sleeps uneasily. Somewhere nearby, a church bell rings. 1, 2, 3, slow notes. The sound rolls across rooftops and disappears into the wet dark. Inside homes, people shift in their beds without fully waking. A dog barks once, annoyed at either the bell or existence itself. Somewhere farther away, footsteps echo against stone as a watchman moves through the streets carrying a lantern. The night has become measured now. Hours matter differently. Before mechanical clocks spread through towns and cities, many people still describe time loosely through natural changes or daily tasks. But clocks slowly trained society to think in smaller units. Work became scheduled more strictly. Curfews became enforceable. Markets, prayers, labor, and travel increasingly followed measured hours. And eventually, sleep would too. You step inside a small timber-framed house where a family sleeps together beneath thick blankets stuffed with straw or wool. The room smells of smoke, damp wood, tallow candles, cooked onions lingering from supper, and too many. People sharing too little air. A tiny fire still glows in the hearth, not enough for comfort, enough to survive the cold. The father wakes first. His eyes open immediately when the church bell sounds again faintly outside. For a moment, he lies motionless, listening to the weather. Rain taps softly against the roof. Wind pushes at the shutters. Then he exhales and settles back into the bedding. He knows how much night remains now. Not approximately. Not by moon position or fading stars, by the bell. That subtle shift changes the psychology of wakefulness. Once people begin dividing darkness into counted hours, waking in the middle of the night becomes easier to measure, compare, and judge. You can now know exactly how long you have been awake, which unfortunately for human peace of mind turns out to be information many people use very badly. You notice the mother nearby open her eyes too, not because of the bell, but because the youngest child has begun coughing softly in sleep. She reek. He's over immediately, placing a hand against the child's chest. The movement is practiced and automatic. Children in pre-modern households often slept close beside parents or siblings, partly for warmth, and partly because space was limited. Separate bedrooms for every child would have seemed unimaginably luxurious to most families. The coughing settles. The mother closes her eyes again. Outside, the watchman calls the hour through the rain. His voice drifts through the streets beneath the lantern glow. Medieval and early modern towns often relied on night watchmen to guard against fire, theft, and disorder. Fire terrified crowded wooden towns. One overturned candle or neglected hearth could destroy entire neighborhoods before dawn. So while most people slept, some remained awake by necessity. You follow the lantern light through the wet streets. The watchman's boots splash through puddles. Rain darkens his cloak. He pauses occasionally beneath windows, listening for unusual sounds. Farther, home one house comes loud snoring. From another, the crying of an infant. From another, laughter still lingering long after midnight. The town breathes through darkness. A bakery already glows faintly ahead. Inside, workers knead dough beside ovens blazing hot against the cold rain outside. Flour dust floats through warm air. Their work begins while others sleep because bread must be ready by morning. Urban life increasingly separated human schedules. Some slept while others labored. The 24-hour city was beginning quietly, long before electricity. You warm your hands briefly near the bakery ovens. The heat feels wonderful after the wet streets. One exhausted baker rubs his eyes with flour-coated fingers before returning to work. His body clearly disagrees with the concept of being awake right now. Human biology and economic systems have been arguing for centuries. The baker yawns massively. Another worker laughs at him while stifling his own yawn. Seconds later, the room smells rich with yeast, smoke, ash, and rising bread. Outside, rain continues tapping softly across rooftops and stone. Back in the sleeping houses, people move through layered nighttime rhythms. Some wake briefly after the bells. Others remain deeply asleep. Some rise before dawn for labor. Some drift into a second period of sleep after a short waking interval. Documents from later centuries describe people referring naturally to first sleep and second sleep, especially before industrial schedules hardened daily routines further. Between those periods, people might pray, talk, read by candlelight, visit neighbors, tend fires, or simply lie awake peacefully before returning to bed. The modern idea that uninterrupted sleep is the only proper sleep had not fully taken hold yet. You step into a narrow alley where rainwater runs steadily toward the lower streets. Above you, windows glow faintly behind shutters. Somewhere, a couple argues softly through thin walls. Somewhere else, someone quietly sings S to a restless child. Human nights remain crowded with interruptions. Only the setting changes. The church bell rings again in the distance. Measured time moves through the darkness like a slow heartbeat. You realize that clocks did not erase the ancient body. They only placed new expectations on it. The body still wakes, still listens, still drifts between deeper and lighter sleep, but now the mind begins counting. How many hours remain? How early is morning? How late is it already? The arithmetic of wakefulness begins here. You stop beneath an awning and listen to the rain. The town smells alive despite the hour-wet horses, smoke, bread, refuse, damp wool, river mud somewhere beyond the walls. Humanity concentrated into streets and schedules. And above it all, hidden behind clouds tonight, the same ancient sky still stretches overhead, whether people notice it or not. The watchman disappears around a corner. The bakery ovens roar softly in the distance. Families sleep close together, behind wooden walls. Candles burn low. The bells continue measuring darkness. And somewhere deep beneath the ticking of human clocks, the old prehistoric sleeper still wakes briefly in the night, listening not for the hour, but for warmth, safety, breathing, and the slow return of dawn. Then the factories arrive, and the night grows shorter. You feel the change immediately. The air itself seems different now, thick with coal smoke and damp fog drifting through crowded industrial streets. The quiet rhythms of older nights have been pushed aside by machines, whistles, labor that no longer bends naturally with sunrise and darkness. You stand in a narrow 19th century street while rain glistens beneath gas lamps. Windows glow behind soot-stained brick buildings. Chimneys rise into the black sky like dark trees made of smoke. Somewhere nearby, iron clatters against iron. A distant factory hum continues even at this hour, low and mechanical, like the city itself refusing to sleep. The industry. While night is restless, and human sleep begins straining against it. You walk past rows of workers' housing packed tightly together. Inside, entire families sleep in small rooms warmed poorly against the cold. The smell drifting from open alleys is a heavy mixture of coal smoke, wet wool, horse manure, stale beer, boiled cabbage, machine oil, and too many exhausted people breathing the same damp air. A child coughs somewhere behind a thin wall, then another. The city never becomes fully silent. Factories transformed time more aggressively than church bells ever could. Work no longer followed daylight as closely. Shifts began before sunrise. Some continued deep into the night. Mechanical clocks ruled labor with increasing precision, and workers often slept according to industrial schedules rather than natural rhythms. For many people, waking in darkness was no longer optional or gentle. It became mandatory. A whistle shrieks suddenly across the city, sharp, brutal, utterly tense. In nearby houses, bodies stir immediately. Men rise from beds while still half asleep. Women light lamps. Boots scrape across wooden floors. Someone mutters a complaint so ancient and heartfelt that it transcends language entirely. The pre-dawn factory whistle may be one of history's least relaxing sounds. You follow a group of workers moving through the wet streets. Their faces look grey in the gaslight worn down by long labor and too little rest. One young man yawns continuously while buttoning his coat wrong twice before giving up entirely. Another carries a piece of bread in one hand, chewing mechanically while walking. Sleep, during the Industrial Revolution, often became fragmented in harsher ways than before. Crowded housing, long work hours, artificial lighting, shift labor, urban noise, and poor air quality all shaped rest. Many workers simply did not sleep enough. Others slept irregularly, depending on factory demands. The body that once woke naturally beside fading embers now answered whistles and clocks. You enter a factory yard where steam drifts upward into the freezing dark. Workers file through gates beneath lamps swinging in the wind. Their footsteps echo against brick walls slick with rainwater. Inside, the building is deafening. Machines pound and rattle endlessly. Belts spin. Metal screams against metal. The air smells hot and oily, despite the cold outside. Fine dust hangs in the light. Even at night, the factory feels awake, alive in the wrong way, consuming hours, bodies, and attention. One exhausted worker rubs his eyes repeatedly while tending a machine. Another drinks bitter coffee from a tin cup, desperate to stay alert before dawn fully arrives. Caffeine changes the story, too. Coffee houses spread earlier in many cities, but industrial society embraced stimulants with new intensity because industrial schedules demanded alertness disconnected from natural light. Humans have always used substances to shape sleep and wakefulness, but now, entire. Economies depended on keeping people productive at unnatural hours. You think about the ancient campfire again. How different waking felt there. A body rose slowly from sleep to feed the fire, listen to rain, or soothe a child. Wakefulness belonged to darkness itself. Here, waking belongs to industry, to wages, to productivity, to survival inside a mechanical timetable. Outside the factory windows, dawn has not yet arrived. The workers labor anyway. One older woman pauses briefly at her station and stretches her aching shoulders. Her eyes close for just a second too long before she forces them open again. Another worker beside her notices and taps the machine loudly to keep her alert. Exhaustion becomes communal here. Too only now, it carries urgency. Industrial records from the 19th century often describe overwhelming fatigue among laborers working long hours in mills, mines, railroads, and factories. Sleep was frequently shortened by necessity rather than choice. Children sometimes worked these schedules too, waking before dawn in freezing rooms to labor beside adults. You step back into the street. Rain continues falling softly through the gaslight. A bakery nearby glows warmly against the darkness, much like the older bakery from centuries earlier. But now, even the bakers work beneath stricter schedules shaped by industrial markets and urban demand. Inside, workers move quickly. Everything feels faster. That may be the deepest change. The old night once unfolded slowly. Even wakefulness had patience. Industrial society accelerates time itself. Minutes matter differently now. Delays cost money. Clocks govern movement everywhere. And yet, the body beneath the clothing remains ancient. You see it constantly. Workers nodding towards sleep during breaks, people falling asleep in chairs beside weak fires, families sleeping several together for warmth, mothers waking instantly at a child's cry despite crushing exhaustion, laborers waking naturally moments before whistle. Ease after years of repetition. The nervous system adapts as best it can. A train whistle somewhere beyond the fog, a harsh mechanical cry cutting through darkness. Steam rises above rooftops. Horses move slowly through muddy streets, pulling carts toward markets, already stirring awake. Lamps flicker behind curtains, where some people still sleep while others have already worked for hours. The industrial city divides human sleep unevenly. Some rest, some labor, some return home just as others wake. Night shifts begin reshaping the body's oldest expectations. You stand beneath the rain and watch workers disappear into the factory gates, one after another. Their ancestors once slept beneath stars and open skies. Now they sleep beside brick walls, machine noise, factory smoke, and clocks that never stop counting. Still, even here, the old sleeper survives. The body still longs for darkness, still softens beside warmth, still wakes in the middle hours to listen, still struggles when pushed. Too far from the rhythms it once knew. The whistle sounds again. The machines continue roaring through the dawn. And somewhere beneath the smoke and iron of the industrial night, the ancient human nervous system quietly tries to remember the slower breathing of firelight beneath the stars. Then the electric light arrives. Quietly at first, a few glowing windows, a lamp humming faintly above a street corner, a single bulb hanging from a ceiling where candles once flickered. But once humans discover how to turn night into something brighter, sleep changes forever. You stand in an early 20th century city street beneath electric lamps glowing pale gold through drifting fog. Rain from earlier has stopped, leaving the pavement slick and reflective beneath the lights. Streetcars rattle in the distance. Somewhere, a radio plays faint music through an open apartment window. The night no longer belongs fully to darkness. That is the great transformation. For tens of thousands of years, sunset dimmed the human world. Firelight and candles created islands of glow surrounded by shadow. But electric lighting spreads brightness outward with astonishing force. Streets stay active later. Shops remain open longer. Factories run overnight. Entertainment stretches deep into evening, and the body notices. You walk past rows of apartment buildings where windows shine at different intensities. Some families are asleep already. Others remain awake reading, cooking, sewing, arguing softly, listening to music, or simply enjoying hours that earlier generations would have spent mostly in darkness. Electricity expands the evening, but it also shortens the night. Inside one apartment, a young couple prepares reluctantly for bed. The room is small but comfortable compared to many older homes you've visited across history. There's wallpaper peeling slightly near the ceiling, a radiator clicking softly beside the wall, heavy curtains pulled across the window, a glowing lamp near the bed casting. Warm yellow light across books and folded clothing. The man sits reading a newspaper, despite obvious exhaustion. The woman brushes her hair slowly while suppressing yawns. Neither seems eager to extinguish the light. That matters. Before electricity, evening activities were naturally limited by dim firelight or expensive candles. Bright, artificial lighting weakens the body's older signals about darkness and sleep. Humans gain freedom from the sun's schedule, but that freedom comes with consequences the nervous system never fully prepared for. Outside, cars move through wet streets below. The city glows not wildly yet, not like modern skylines blazing all night long, but enough to soften the stars overhead. The couple finally turns out the lamp. Darkness arrives suddenly, and immediately the room feels different, quieter, more inward. The man lies awake for several moments, staring toward the ceiling. Traffic hum drifts faintly upward from the street. Pipes knock somewhere inside the building. El ding. A neighbor coughs through the wall. Urban sleep has become layered with mechanical sounds now. Engines, electricity, plumbing, elevators, radios. Human beings adapt quickly, but the brain still responds to sound during sleep, even when people believe they've gotten used to it. The woman beside him falls asleep first. Her breathing deepens gradually, while the man remains awake, listening to the city. You recognize the expression immediately, not fear, not discomfort, just alertness lingering too long. The same ancient body is still waking to listen through the night. Only now, instead of wind through trees or distant animal calls, it hears tires on pavement and footsteps in hallways. Elsewhere in the city, countless other people remain awake. A nurse finishing a hospital shift beneath bright fluorescent lights. Factory workers leaving night duty. Newspaper printers preparing morning editions. Jazz musicians packing instruments after midnight performances. Train operators, police-o. Epiphysers, mothers feeding infants beneath dim lamps. The electric city creates endless islands of wakefulness. You step back outside into the glowing streets. Storefront signs shimmer in puddles. Steam rises from subway grates into the cold air. A late streetcar rattles past, carrying tired passengers home through the wet night. One young office worker sits alone inside a diner beneath harsh white lighting, drinking coffee while staring blankly at nothing in particular. The cook behind the counter wipes dishes slowly, equally exhausted. The modern relationship between caffeine and artificial light is becoming firmly established now. Humans push wakefulness further into the night, then use stimulants to remain alert afterward, then wonder why the nervous system occasionally protests at 3 o'clock in the morning. You walk farther downtown. Movie theaters glow with electric marquees. Hotel windows shine above the street. Advertisements flash and blink in patterns specifically designed to capture attention. The city competes against darkness itself, and darkness loses, at least externally. Inside the body, though, the older rhythms remain stubborn even in the age of electricity. People continue waking during the night. They continue drifting through lighter and deeper sleep cycles. They continue responding to stress, sound, temperature, emotion, illness, children, hunger, and memory. Technology changes the environment faster than biology changes the body. You pause beneath a street lamp while rainwater drips steadily from fire escapes overhead. The air smells of wet pavement, cigarette smoke, machine oil, perfume, hot food from a nearby restaurant, and electricity itself that strange metallic scent cities sometimes carry after rain. A taxi passes, spraying water across the street. Somewhere above you, a baby begins crying in an apartment window, glowing pale blue from a bedside lamp. Immediately, another shadow rises from bed to comfort the child. Still the same gesture, still tea. The same human night. The stars above the city are faint now, not gone completely, just weakened. You realize that modern insomnia may partly emerge from this strange collision between ancient biology and endless artificial wakefulness. The body evolved expecting darkness to arrive gradually and consistently. Instead, electric light stretches evening later and later, while work schedules often remain fixed. The result is a nervous system pulled in conflicting directions. Stay awake, wake early, remain productive, sleep deeply, do not wake. Wake instantly if needed. The demands overlap until the body sometimes simply opens its eyes at midnight and waits quietly in confusion. Inside another apartment nearby, a man wakes suddenly and checks a glowing clock beside his bed, 2:17. Immediately his face tightens with concern. The arithmetic returns. How many hours left? How tired tomorrow? The clock glows softly in the darkness like a tiny electric judge. You almost want to whisper to him about the prehistoric campfire, about the elders waking gently beside embers, about rain tapping against hides, about humans listening through darkness for 50,000 years. Instead, the city hums around him electric, restless, bright enough to delay sleep, loud enough to disturb it. And somewhere beneath all the wires, bulbs, radios, traffic, and glowing windows, the old sleeper still waits patiently for a darkness modern life rarely allows completely. Now the screens glow in the dark, tiny rectangles of blue-white light resting inches from tired faces long after midnight. You sit inside a modern bedroom where almost everything has been designed for comfort. The mattress is soft. The temperature is controlled. The windows close tightly against weather. The roof does not leak. No wolves circle outside. No factory whistle waits before dawn. No watchman walks the streets calling the hour. And yet people still wake. Sometimes more than ever. A phone screen lights briefly on the bedside table. 2:30 a.m. The room glows faintly blue for a moment, before darkness returns again. Outside, the modern city hums softly beneath distant traffic and scattered streetlights. Inside, the sleeper beside you turns over and exhales deeply into the pillow. Then their eyes open immediately awake, not fully frightened, just suddenly alert. You recognize the moment instantly, because it is one of the oldest human experiences in the world. A body rising briefly from sleep to check the night. Only now, the night is very different. The person reaches for the phone almost automatically. That movement has become astonishingly fast in modern life. Faster than lighting a candle, faster than tending a fire, faster than even opening curtains to look at the moon. The modern sleeper touches the entire world before fully waking. Notifications glow across the screen. Messages, news, weather, emails, headlines designed specifically to trigger emotional alarm at 2 a.m. for absolutely no useful reason. The number. Nervous system floods awake. This is something ancient humans never experienced. The prehistoric sleeper waking beside embers did not suddenly receive updates about disasters happening across oceans while half-conscious beneath a blanket. The human brain evolved for immediate local awareness. Now, it absorbs global information instantly at every hour. You watch the person stare at the screen too long. Their eyes narrow slightly against the brightness. Their breathing changes. Sleep drifts farther away, while the mind becomes active and analytical. Thoughts begin multiplying. Tomorrow's work. That conversation earlier. The thing left unfinished. The strange ache in the shoulder. The unanswered message. The awkward memory from 6 years ago that arrives nightly like an uninvited ghost with excellent timing. Modern wakefulness often becomes cognitive instead of environmental. The body still wakes the old way, but the mind fills the darkness differently now. The phone screen finally goes dark. Again, the room returns to shadow. For a moment, the person simply lies there, listening. A refrigerator hums somewhere down the hall, distant traffic outside, a neighbor's footsteps above, the soft breathing of another sleeper nearby. Even now, the body still checks for sound and safety exactly as it once did beside prehistoric fires. Only the environment has changed. Sleep scientists today know that light strongly affects the body's internal timing systems. Bright evening light can delay melatonin release and shift circadian rhythms later. Blue-enriched light from screens may be especially stimulating for some people at night. But knowing this and living around it are different things entirely. Modern life surrounds people with artificial daylight long after sunset. Work continues. Entertainment continues. Conversation continues. Information never stops arriving. Darkness itself has become optional. You walk quietly through the apartment. A digital clock glows in the kitchen, small L. Lights blink from appliances and routers like tiny artificial stars. The air smells faintly of detergent, warm electronics, fabric softener, and leftover coffee from earlier in the day. The modern home is incredibly safe by historical standards. And still, the body wakes, that matters. It means waking was never only about danger. It was also about flexibility, awareness, connection to changing internal and external conditions. You stop beside the window. Outside, apartment towers rise against the night sky, their windows glowing at different hours. Some people sleep, others work late, some watch television, some feed infants, some lie awake staring at ceilings, while mentally rewriting conversations from 2014. Entire cities now stay awake together in fragments. One person begins their shift as another ends theirs. One eats dinner while another brushes teeth before bed. One watches sunrise while another finally falls asleep. Human sleep has become socially desynchronized in ways prehistoric. See communities never experienced. Yet the ancient body keeps trying. You return to the bedroom. The sleeper has placed the phone face down now, which feels emotionally significant somehow. They close their eyes again and pull the blanket higher across their chest. At first, nothing happens.
Thoughts still move too quickly. The body remains tense with alertness. Then slowly, the breathing changes longer, softer.
You think back across the journey through history. The prehistoric fire, the farming village, the monastery bells, the factory whistle, the electric city, and now this glowing modern room. Every age reshaped the night differently, but none erased the old human rhythms entirely. People always woke sometimes. Children always cried. Someone always listened through the dark. Someone always watched the fire, checked the animals, answered the bell, fed the machine, silenced the alarm, or stared briefly into the night, wondering why sleep had loosened its grip. The modern sleeper beside you shifts once more. Not restless now, just settling. The body remembers how to return. That may be the most comforting truth in all of this. Sleep is resilient. Human beings have carried it through storms, predators, crowded cities, freezing winters, crying babies, dangerous labor, noisy neighbors, bells, clocks, machines, electric lights, and now glowing screens humming softly through the dark. The ancient N. Irva's system survives every era by adapting imperfectly but persistently. Outside the window, clouds drift slowly across the city lights. Inside, the room grows quieter. The sleeper's hand loosens against the blanket. Their breathing deepens, and somewhere beneath the electronic schedules, notifications, and endless modern stimulation, the old prehistoric human finally settles again beside an invisible fire, listening softly as the night carries them back toward rest. And now, after all these thousands of years, you begin to understand the strange comfort hidden inside midnight waking, not as a problem, not as failure, but as part of being human. You lie quietly in the modern dark, while the long history of sleep settles around you like layers of old fire smoke. The prehistoric camp still exists somewhere inside your body. So do the monastery bells, the crowded city rooftops, the winter villages, the factory whistles, the electric streets. The human night never truly disappeared. It only changed clothes. Outside your window, the world continues moving softly. A distant car passes through wet streets. Somewhere in another apartment, water runs briefly through pipes. A dog barks once far away, and then decides the matter no longer requires attention. Your room remains still. Cool sheets, soft shadows, a faint line of streetlight beneath the curtains, the quiet ticking of modern life around you. You breathe slowly and feel how much safer this room is than almost any sleeping place humans once knew. No freezing rain reaching through hides. No predators beyond firelight. No need to guard grain stores, answer monastery bells, or rise before dawn to feed factory furnaces. And yet the body still wakes, because safety alone never erased the ancient rhythm. Sleep was always flexible. Humans survived, partly because they could wake when needed. A sleeping group where nobody stirred through danger would not remain a group for very long. So the nervous system learned responsively. It learned to float upward briefly through darkness and then sink again once the world felt calm. Your body still carries that inheritance, even here, especially here. The modern sleeper often expects perfection from sleep: 8 uninterrupted hours, complete unconsciousness, instant restfulness by morning. Anything less can feel broken. But history tells a softer story. For most of human existence, the night was active in small ways. Fires needed tending. Weather changed. Children woke. Animals moved. People prayed, talked quietly, repaired tools, checked sounds, shared warmth, listened to storms, or simply lay awake for a while beneath darkness. The ancient sleeper was not shocked by wakefulness. The ancient sleeper expected movement through the night. You turn onto your side beneath a blanket. The fabric feels warm against your skin. Now your breathing slows naturally when you stop resisting the darkness. That may be one of the great hidden lessons buried beneath all these centuries. Rise. The body often returns to sleep more easily when fear leaves the room. A faint glow from the clock touches the edge of the nightstand. You don't check it this time. That feels important too. The old prehistoric humans never knew the exact hour. The monastic sleeper heard bells, but not digital minutes. The factory worker feared whistles more than numbers glowing blue in darkness. Only recently have humans begun measuring sleeplessness with such precision, and precision can sharpen worry. You realize how much modern life encourages constant monitoring. Steps counted, calories counted, hours counted, notifications counted, sleep scores counted. The body becomes a project under surveillance. Meanwhile, the older nervous system quietly asks for simpler things: darkness, warmth, safety, rhythm, calm breathing nearby. You think back to the ancient fire one more time. The old woman checking sleeping children, the embers glowing beneath ash, rain tapping softly overhead, someone waking briefly to listen beyond the circle of light, then resting again. That ancient scene feels strangely close, now despite the distance of 50,000 years. Perhaps because the body has never stopped being that body. Modern people often speak about natural sleep as if somewhere in the past humans discovered one perfect method. But history suggests something far more human and forgiving. Sleep adapted constantly to climate, to danger, to architecture, to work, to technology, to community, to loneliness, to noise, to light. The remarkable thing is not that humans wake sometimes. The remarkable thing is that humans sleep at all, despite everything, despite storms, despite grief, despite babies, despite industrial machinery, despite glowing screens and anxious thoughts, and neighbors dragging furniture at impossible hours for reasons no civilization has ever adequately explained. Still, the body sleeps, still dreams, still heals itself quietly in darkness. Outside, clouds drift slowly across the hidden stars. You imagine the sky above your roof continuing outward beyond the city glow. The same sky once watched by hunters beside Ice Age fires. The same moon crossing over farming villages, monastery towers, industrial streets, and electric apartment windows. The night connects all of them. You feel your muscles loosening now, jaw unclenching, shoulders sinking deeper into the mattress, thoughts slowing their endless pacing. Sleep approaches gently when allowed to arrive on its own terms, not commanded, invited. The room grows softer around the edges. Your breathing deepens. The old survival systems inside the nervous system finally quiet themselves. No danger nearby, no storm approaching, no predators beyond the fire. No need to stay alert any longer.
Only darkness,
Only warmth.
only the ancient rhythm carrying you slowly downward again.
And perhaps that is the final truth hidden beneath this long journey through human nights. When you wake at midnight, you are not malfunctioning. You are participating in something extraordinarily old, a human body pausing briefly in darkness to listen to the world. Then, once reassured, allowing sleep to return like distant footsteps, fading softly through the night. Now, the night becomes very still. Not empty, not silent, just softer. You lie comfortably beneath a blanket while the long journey through human sleep finally begins settling like dust after footsteps have passed. The ancient campfire has faded into embers somewhere deep in memory. The monastery bells are quiet now. The factory whistles have stopped. The electric city glows far away behind closed curtains. Only the slow breathing of the night remains. You imagine once more that first prehistoric camp beneath the stars. Cold air moving gently through dark grass. Smoke drifting upward into the enormous sky. Children sleeping close beside their families. Someone half awake beside the fire, listening softly to the world before resting again. The scene no longer feels different, distant. After traveling through so many centuries, you can feel how closely connected all those sleepers really were. The hunter beside the embers. The farmer listening to animals outside the house. The monk waking to candlelit prayer. The exhausted factory worker. The modern insomniac checking the clock at 2 a.m. Different worlds. Same human body. The same nervous system crossing darkness again and again through thousands of generations. You breathe slowly. In. Out. Your room feels warmer now. Safer. The mattress beneath you softens around your weight. The pillow supports your head gently, while the sounds outside grow quieter and farther away. Perhaps there is still distant traffic somewhere, or rain brushing softly against glass, or wind moving through trees beyond the streetlights, but nothing urgent reaches you here. Nothing dangerous. The old survival systems inside the body can finally loosen their grip. You think about how humans once slept beneath open skies for far longer than they have slept inside modern homes. Entire generations rested beside firelight and moonlight while listening to weather, animals, breathing companions, and shifting wind. Darkness was never perfectly silent. It carried movement, texture, life, and still humans slept. That may be the most comforting thought of all. The body knows how to rest even imperfectly. Even after interruption, even after worry, even after waking briefly in the middle hours to sleep, does not require perfection to return. Outside your window, clouds drift quietly across the hidden stars. Somewhere far beyond the city's glow above highways and rooftops and apartment buildings, the same night sky still stretches across the world exactly as it did above prehistoric fires. People are sleeping beneath it now in every possible way. In crowded cities, in quiet villages, in mountain cabins, in tiny apartments, in houses near oceans, in desert towns, in rooms lit faintly by alarm clocks and charging phones. Parents, beside children, night workers returning home at dawn, elders waking briefly before sunrise, travelers in unfamiliar beds, someone listening to rain, someone staring sleepily at the ceiling before finally drifting off again. All of them connected by the same ancient rhythm. You let your thoughts slow. No need to measure the hours now. No need to calculate tomorrow. The night does not demand anything from you at this moment except rest. Your breathing deepens naturally. The muscles in your shoulders soften. Your jaw relaxes. The room grows pleasantly heavy around you, as if darkness itself has become a warm blanket settling gently over the world. And somewhere in the distance of memory, the prehistoric fire still burns low beneath the stars. A quiet circle of warmth against the cold night. People sleeping close together, someone tending the embers carefully, someone waking briefly to listen beyond the edge of the light, then lying back down again, reassured by the steady breathing of others nearby. You can almost hear the soft crackle of the fire now, the wind moving through grass, rainwater dripping from leaves after a storm, a faint murmur of voices fading into sleep. The sounds become slower, more distant, more peaceful. The long human night continues exactly as it always has, carrying countless sleeping minds safely toward morning. And you are part of it too, another quiet sleeper beneath the ancient sky. Another human body remembering rhythms older than history itself. The darkness grows softer still. The thoughts drift farther apart. The night settles gently around you like falling snow. And at last, with no hurry at all, sleep returns the way it returned beside those prehistoric fires 50,000 years ago. Slowly, warmly, naturally. Sweet dreams.